Most of you aren't subscribed. Make sure to subscribe, as it helps out the channel. Without further ado, the series starts with the kingdoms of Rofei, Paradil, Cansheep, Shoots, Sites and Missian all being absorbed by the kingdom of Ansel, ultimately making the land the Empire of Summerfirth. In the year 212, a boy calls out to his younger brother and sister, Kryze and Ren, asking them to say a final goodbye to their father, watching as their father is finally put to rest. Revealed to be Lord Ars, Ars sheds a tear, all whilst placing a flower on the burial as a final goodbye, turning to face the crowd, only to declare that he'll be in charge of the Luvent house moving forward. Flashing back, we see an everyday business worker working his boring 9 to 5, getting ready for work one day, only to suffer a heart attack. Upon waking up, our MC is confused to see a lady admiring his looks, confused as to where he is. Spotting a flying dog, our MC learns the lady is his mother, spotting his child like a reflection in a metal tray. With the year being 200, our MC Ars Luvent was born in Lamberg within the kingdom of Missian. As 3 years pass by, a maid brings Ars some tea, shocked to see the 3-year-old Ars is already capable of reading and writing. Ars narrates how he has a general idea of the overall Summerfirth's empire structure, noting how it's quite different to Earth. With the world being filled with magic, Ars reveals that his Luvent family is a noble household, owners of various houses within the land of Lamberg. As Ars walks around his mansion, Ars is grateful to have so many maids and cooks serve them, revealing that he has a skill that no one else has. With Ars sitting in on the house's night sparring, Ars spots 2 men dueling, using his secret appraisal skill on Malay Crystal, noting how Milias would be better off wielding a bow. Seeing Malay unable to keep up with his training partner, Ars asks if Milias has ever wielded a bow, but Milias states that it's not manly to fight from afar. Using his adorable looks, Ars convinces Milias to give the bow a go, but upon drawing the bow for the first time, Milias is able to flawlessly hit the center of his targets. With the other knights praising Milias for his newfound talent, the knights wonder how Ars knew Milias would be good with a bow, but Ars is forced to lie, knowing that his skill is too rare to reveal, sad that he can't appraise his own skills. That night as Ars joins his family for dinner, Ars' father, Raven Luvent praises Ars for discovering Milias's bow skills, prompting Ars to scan his father's stats, amazed that his father is capable of defeating 10 men at once with his martial arts skills coupled with his outrageous prowess stat. Getting serious, Raven tells Ars that he wants Ars to continue training this instinct of his, as one day he'll inherit his father's wealth. With Ars continuing to read up and learn about the Empire, Ars realizes that the whole Empire is corrupt, with peasants beginning to fight back. Luckily nobles have been able to temporarily keep the peasants busy, but eventually the disorganized Empire will be overrun with war. Fearing the horrors of war, Ars knows that with his appraisal skill, he'll be able to help out the less fortunate, suddenly running off somewhere. As Ars heads through town, Ars is greeted by all the kind villagers, who Ars begins appraising, in hopes of finding someone talented. Sadly, after exhausting his skill, Ars' eyes begin to grow tired, sitting down to rest. Just then, a man is seen being thrown out of a store, deemed Malkans by the villagers, as they are people that swam across the sea to enter the Empire. Knowing that most Malkans end up becoming slaves, Ars gives the man a piece of bread, appraising the man's stats, shocked that Reitz Muses has no flaws in his stats. As Reitz thanks Ars for the food, Reitz attempts to leave, but Ars simply follows Reitz to a nearby alley, asking Reitz to become his retainer. Believing Ars is joking, Reitz is shocked to see Ars offer him such an important job. Reitz wonders how Ars knows so much about a person he's just met. With Ars dancing around the question, Reitz fears that he'll get Ars into trouble, attempting to leave once more, but Ars lures Reitz back in with the promise of rare and delicious meals. As Reitz sits at the same table as Ars is sad to see that the discrimination against Malkans runs deep, as the mansion's maids and chefs refuse to serve Reitz any pleasant meals. Annoyed, Ars moves closer to Reitz, ordering the maids and chefs to treat Reitz with respect, prompting Reitz to begin indulging in the delicious meals. Ars learns that Reitz originally belonged to a group of mercenaries, but sadly most of the members had passed away and ever since then Reitz didn't have any luck finding any jobs. With one of the butlers asking Reitz to leave, Ars intervenes stating that he wants Reitz as his retainer, telling Raven about Reitz. Ars' father flat out refuses to allow Reitz to serve Ars, stating that Malkans have never been heard of wielding skills that can rival nor surpass Summerfordians. Sad to see that his father also discriminates against Malkans, Ars asks that his father simply test Reitz, convincing his father to test Reitz himself. Ars' father states that if Reitz passes, Reitz will start off as a soldier for their family, pleasing Ars, but Ars' father coldly declares that he'll be dueling Reitz for their test. Nervous, Ars reveals that REITZ is only 14 years old, compared to his father that has years of combat experience, but Ars' father reassures REITZ that he'll be given a handicap. As REITZ agrees to the duel, they all follow Raven through the mansion, but REITZ asks why Ars is so persistent on his retainer. Upon hearing that Ars doesn't care about REITZ being a Malkin, REITZ is shocked to hear that Ars needs REITZ by his side for the future, promising to do his best. With everyone heading to the training area, several knights help prepare practice swords in an hourglass, only for Raven to announce that REITZ will win if he lands a single blow within the allotted time. With Ars revealing that his father Raven is by far the strongest within their land, REITZ and Raven begin their duel, prompting Raven to dash forward only for REITZ to barely avoid, having sensed Raven's murderous intent. REITZ is amazed at Raven's speed and power, forced to defend each consecutive strike, but at the same time the knights remark how Raven, even when holding back, dominates the knights, but REITZ seems to be holding his own. Sadly at that moment, REITZ is caught off guard, struck to the ground, but seeing Ars still having hope in him, REITZ gets back up, glaring at Raven. Dashing forward, REITZ slips under Raven's initial slash, using a nearby window to temporarily blind Raven, only to cleave his sword at Raven from above. Sadly, Raven is able to flawlessly block the blow, but announces that the duel is over, revealing that REITZ had cut some of Raven's hair. With everyone amazed, Raven promises to recruit REITZ as a knight, amazed that Ars had once again discovered someone very talented. Raven admits that he had feared Ars would have trouble navigating the world, but is excited to see what Ars will become in the future, jokingly suggesting Ars aim for the Emperor. With the existing knights accepting REITZ as their own, we cut to REITZ all suited up, reporting that he has begun taking up chores around the house. REITZ reiterates his gratitude for Ars, promising to spend his life serving Ars. With several months passing by, REITZ is seen helping out across the mansion, helping move things around, continuing to spar with the mansion's knights, and has even begun studying. In no time, Ars had noticed that REITZ's ingenuity had risen to 89, making REITZ loved by everyone in the household within the domain, especially the maids. As Ars and REITZ studies together, Ars recaps that the continent had originally been split into 7 kingdoms, but since the kingdom of Ansel had access to other continents, it eventually overtook the entire continent, hence the birth of the Empire Summerfirth. It's revealed that the king Anathas Bidoras ultimately claimed the throne for the empire, and began his rule 203 years ago. REITZ adds that the Summerfirth Empire is slowly crumbling, as the current sovereign, Bidoras VII, is only 8 years old, and is being influenced by his corrupt retainers. It's due to this corruption that several areas had begun to revolt against the empire, something Ars knows about since his father Raven had to be dispatched to deal with. Fearing that things may escalate, Ars reasons that he needs to gather more powerful and trusted allies quickly, but Ars asks REITZ where he thinks the next revolt may occur. REITZ states that he believes the Mysian province is the most likely location, adding that the current governor, Amador Salamakai, is old and destined to pass away. REITZ reveals that the governor has 2 sons, but due to their rivalry for the throne, it's inevitable that the sons wage war against one another. Hearing this, Ars gets worried, as his father will have to intervene and pick a side, but REITZ reminds Ars that Raven won't be able to decide for himself which side he should fight for. Ars states that their home of Lamberg resides in the province of Mysian, specifically the Canair district, meaning Raven serves under the Canair headman. Deep in thought, Ars wonders how he can support his father if they were ever put on a losing fight, but just then REITZ gets excited, reminding Ars that this is their perfect chance to show how skilled they both are. With Ars and REITZ heading to town, they run into Ars' father, Raven, amazed that Raven is training harder than ever. When Raven hears that Ars plans to scout more promising recruits, Raven suggests Ars focus on recruiting magic users, which REITZ knows can drastically change the flow of a fight. Ars remembers a time when Raven had gifted him magical artifact, hoping to see Ars' magical capabilities, but was embarrassed to see Ars was non-compatible with magic. With Ars and REITZ heading to town on horseback, they make it to the town of Canair, a location REITZ states houses 50,000 people. Since the town is the capital of Canair, the town houses the Pyres family, the rulers of the Canair district. Glancing around, Ars is amazed at how wealthy everyone looks, declaring that he intends to make the people in his hometown of Lamberg rich as well. With so many people nearby, Ars begins appraising everyone, spotting various skills from various people. Sadly, after some time, Ars takes a break, revealing that although people may have talents for certain skills, if they don't have the necessary aptitudes of said skills, they simply won't be of use. As the two continue their way around town, Ars suddenly stops, spotting various homeless people hidden away within an alley. Upon seeing Ars' terrified expression, REITZ states that where there are wealthy people, there is bound to be unfortunate souls, but before Ars can say anything, REITZ cuts Ars off, reminding Ars that he can't help everyone, not yet at least. Knowing that REITZ is correct, Ars promises to strive for a domain that can welcome anyone no matter their situation, impressing REITZ, but at the same time we see someone listening to their conversation. Finally stumbling onto a market area of town, Ars is completely amazed at the variety of products, drawn towards a stand that sells dragon eggs imported from the northern continent. As Ars dreams of owning a dragon as a pet, Ars rushes to purchase several eggs, but REITZ suddenly pulls out a knife. As REITZ threatens the store owner with a knife, REITZ states that trade with the northern continent was banned recently, deducing that the eggs were possibly smuggled. Plus real dragon eggs would need high temperatures to hatch, whereas the present ones have fake spots on them, allowing REITZ to conclude that the fake dragon eggs are in fact giant lizard eggs. Seeing the store owner trying to scam his master, REITZ prepares to slay the store owner, but Ars tugs on REITZ's suit, diffusing the situation. Although Ars appreciates REITZ from protecting him, Ars notes how he better learn about these things as well, but they both stop for lunch. As Ars enjoys the variety of foods, he spots a candy store, rushing over to purchase some candy. Just then a person bumps into Ars, using the opportunity to steal Ars' wallet, prompting REITZ and Ars to pursue them. As the thief weaves through the crowd, REITZ, who is carrying Ars, speeds up, managing to grab at the thief's clothes, revealing the thief to be a young disheveled girl. As the girl heads into an alley, REITZ and Ars follow, only to spot the girl being cornered by some men who seemingly knock her to the ground. Annoyed, Ars calls out for the men to stop, prompting the men to attack Ars, but REITZ nonchalantly intercepts the strike. Pissed, REITZ dismantles the three men, scaring them off. Turning to the girl, Ars scans her stats, amazed that the girl is capable of becoming an S-rank mage, already having 65 points in leadership and 116 in prowess. Ars notes how the girl's prowess is on par with his father's, but her other stats are D-rank, meaning anything not involving magic would be a disadvantage for her. As REITZ demands the girl return Ars' wallet, Ars butts in, asking if the girl would like to be his retainer, but the girl scoffs at the idea, shooting down Ars' offer. Ars states that he knows the girl has a talent for magic, but this weirds the girl out, having never used magic before. Ars reiterates that he has an eye for finding talented people, promising to give the girl a life of luxury compared to her current life, but this only annoys the girl. The girl berates Ars for looking down on her, stating that all nobles were simply lucky to be born into wealth, pissed that Ars is acting like a spoiled noble brat. Ars cries that with the girl's help, he can build a town that can house everyone, but hearing Ars' non-realistic dream, the girl calls out Ars for simply pretending to help out people for his own benefit. Having heard enough, REITZ orders the girl to return Ars' wallet again, prompting the girl to do so. Spotting something around the girl's wrist, Ars asks who the men that attacked the girl were, learning that they work with slave traders and the girl had been captured and sold off as a slave. The girl reveals that she had managed to escape, blaming her beauty for the reason the men are hunting her down, but Ars is curious as to why the girl remains in town even after escaping. Just then several kids swarm the little girl, all crying out to Charlotte, prompting Charlotte to reveal that she can't leave these poor hungry orphans behind. Understanding the situation, Ars promises to leave Charlotte alone, but as a goodbye, Ars offers his wallet to Charlotte, who reluctantly accepts. That night, Ars stares out into the night sky, prompting REITZ to reassure Ars that Ars means good and that there is nothing to feel guilty about. Ars admits that he definitely feels powerless and too inexperienced, but just then Ars spots the orphans searching for him, telling Ars that Charlotte had finally been captured. Flashing back, we cut somewhere at night in the town of Canare, following a young Charlotte grow spiteful of the rich due to her poor circumstance. Even when Charlotte sought help, she was just thrown aside, making her realize people saw her as nothing but trash. Back in the present, her captors toss Charlotte to the ground, beating her up and scolding her for making things so difficult. Seeing this, the boss reminds his gang to not touch Charlotte's face, reiterating that her perverted buyer wants Charlotte's face intact. Just then, one of the captors notices that Charlotte has dropped a fancy-looking wallet, but this aggravates Charlotte, as she leaps to take back the wallet. Left wide open, Charlotte's head is slammed to the ground, but sadly the boss reminds Charlotte that her life is over, as she has nowhere to run to. As the boss begins making fun of Charlotte's pathetic life, we suddenly spot REITZ break through the nearest door, only to follow up by parrying and striking several of the captors down. Running in, Ars checks on Charlotte, immediately scanning the boss's stats, and demanding to know if the boss, Albert Carnier, is a slave trader. With Albert shocked that Ars knows his name, Albert deduces that Ars is a noble, grinning. Ars demands Albert release Charlotte, but Albert reminds Ars that Charlotte is a slave and can't simply be released. But when Charlotte asks Ars to stay out of her business, Ars reveals that Charlotte's eyes look empty. Ars states that Charlotte's ambition stat is at a 1, a stat that defines how much someone believes in themselves to grow. But seeing as Charlotte's is at 1, Ars get pissed, knowing that Charlotte has been living knowing she has no freedom to live. Hearing Ars's words, Charlotte narrates how she can't remember the last time she cried, stating that her life was decided from the day she was born, but in order to survive she needed to ignore her circumstances and steal. With Charlotte finally shedding tears of realization, Albert calls for the remainder of his men, having had enough of Ars interfering. Luckily, REINCARNATES nonchalantly picks one of the men up from their neck, declaring that the men will die tonight. As the men begin surrounding REINCARNATES darts back and forth, evading and slashing the men, but upon spotting several off to the side begin chatting fire spells, REINCARNATES turns his attention to them. With Charlotte shocked at REINCARNATES' abilities, Albert grows more annoyed, calling down his trump card. Marching down the stairs, Albert introduces an ex-military leader, who demands Albert get him more booze. With Charlotte frightened REINCARNATES will lose, Ars scans the military leader's stats, only for REINCARNATES to disappear, reappearing above the officer, following up by knocking out the military leader. With Albert completely defeated, he desperately reminds Ars that slave trading is legal in town, prompting Ars to offer to purchase Charlotte. When Albert stubbornly refuses, REINCARNATES states that they will be taking Charlotte regardless, meaning Ars is being nice and protecting Albert's reputation. Knowing that there is nothing else he can do, Albert accepts, exciting Ars, as he reveals some people are awaiting Charlotte's return. Grateful, Charlotte asks if she can visit somewhere first, taking Ars and REINCARNATES up a steep hill, only to reveal the vast and beautiful scenery. Charlotte states the view is a breath of fresh air and secret spot she keeps to herself, but this makes Ars wonder why Charlotte is willing to share the spot with them. Turning to face Ars, Charlotte asks why Ars wants to build a town of all things, but gets shocked hearing Ars say he likes children. Ars adds on by stating that a children's smile and dreams can reinvigorate any adult, and it's the children's dreams that will ultimately shape and make a better future. By making a town, Ars promises to protect the dreams and future of people less fortunate, declaring that people won't have to suffer like Charlotte, but Ars suddenly realizes that he's rambling on. Impressed, Charlotte agrees to be Ars's retainer, if it means that the children she's been looking after can have a better future as well. Changing topics, REINCARNATES takes out a magical artifact he picked up from the slave captors earlier, stating that he's curious how capable Charlotte is with magic. As REINCARNATES hands Charlotte the artifact and teaches her how to cast a spell, Ars gets excited, wondering how powerful someone with S-rank capabilities is. Now ready, Charlotte raises up her hand, casting a simple fire spell, only for a massive swarm of energy to form around her palm, only to be shot into the air, creating a massive explosion. Having drawn the attention of all the townsfolk, Charlotte's magical artifact is revealed to have been drained of energy, shattering. With Charlotte asking if Ars is impressed, Ars is completely filled with excitement, which REINCARNATES is forced to admit he's amazed as well. Charlotte asks what she gets being Ars' retainer, but upon hearing that she'll get a place to stay, food to eat and a salary, she asks that Ars send all of her pay over to the children's, as she won't be able to take care of them. Completely grateful to Ars, Charlotte gets on one knee, promising to serve Ars for the rest of her life. Shocked at how serious Charlotte is, Ars asks Charlotte to be herself, signaling for Ars and REINCARNATES to begin heading home. Remembering that she took Ars' money, Charlotte apologizes, but Ars tells Charlotte it was his decision, beginning to head down the mountain first. As Charlotte thinks about what Ars' future entails, we cut to Charlotte saying her final goodbye to the children she's been taking care of, all whilst Ars wonders if he can really make a great city. Knowing that he can only take it one step at a time, the three begin riding back, stopping to have a quick snack break where REINCARNATES scolds Charlotte for eating so manically, but Charlotte could care less, taking a quick nap. Upon arriving back home, Raven refuses to accept Charlotte as Ars' retainer, but upon showing off her magic prowess, Raven changes his mind, immediately welcoming Charlotte as Ars' retainer. In the year of 206, Ars greets his father who has returned from helping solve land disputes in the neighboring province of Sites. Happy to see everyone is alright and Raven was victorious, Raven acknowledges that Charlotte was the star of the show, having grown so much in only 3 years. Having easily wiped out the enemies with her powerful magic, Charlotte ultimately gained the title of Leuven's Lady of Flames, and her increase in stats ultimately gave rise to a greater mage corps for their family's army. Just then, Ars' mother greets Raven, showing Ars' new twin siblings, Kreese and Ren, to Raven. As Raven admires Kreese and Ren, Ars notes how his siblings will be vital to him in the future, But just then REITZ informs Ars that there may be more talented hunter candidates Ars can recruit. As Ars and REITZ prepare their horse Macaroni to visit the hunters outside of town, they both notice Charlotte peeping on them, but when Ars tells Charlotte that they are searching for more skilled people, Charlotte offers to join their search. As the three ride the same horse, Ars feels quite cramped, all whilst Charlotte complains about their slow pace. But REITZ says it's Charlotte weighing everyone down, for not being to ride a horse of her own. Snapping back, Charlotte points out her weight and Ars combined still isn't as heavy as REITZ, asking REITZ to get off and run behind them. Scolding Charlotte for suggesting such things, they both begin arguing who's closer to Ars, but out of nowhere a boar runs across their path, only for a stray arrow to appear, instantly slaying the boar. As two hunters approach the boar, they nonchalantly talk about their number of hunts each, but they suddenly spot Ars and his party, running over to see if everyone is okay. Scanning their stats, Ars is amazed to see the hunters have prowess of 67 and 65, with the older brother Grottos having a ranked potential for infantry whereas the younger brother Marcus has a ranked potential for archery. As the brothers take everyone back home, they are shocked to be served such delectable food, apologizing for barging in on their home. As Charlotte begins digging in, REITZ asks does Charlotte learn some table manners, but getting down to topic, the brother's father asks what Ars is doing here. Ars reveals that he would like to recruit Marcus and Grottos for their family's armies, exciting the three men, as their family will get the honor to fight for their country. The father compliments Ars' mature attitude, revealing that his youngest son Rosal isn't as mature as Ars. Curious as to who this Rosal is, a tiny hand suddenly reaches for some bread, quickly retreating back into his room, but suddenly his father calls out for Rosal to properly greet Ars. As Rosal struggles to muster out some words, Ars notes the low stats, but upon seeing that Rosal has the potential to grow his ingenuity stat to 109, Ars chokes on his beverage, knowing that no one would be able to boast a higher stat. Since Rosal is still young, it makes sense for Rosal to have such underdeveloped stats, but knowing that he needs Rosal, Ars asks if Rosal would like to be his retainer. Shocked at the suggestion, Rosal begins fearing what Ars and the others will have him do. Rosal cries that he doesn't want to leave, locking himself in his room. The father apologizes for Rosal's behavior, revealing that Rosal's mother passed away 2 years ago, believing it to be the cause of Rosal being so underdeveloped, as normal hunters his age would be chopping down wood and training with a bow. When Rosal's father says he doesn't want Rosal to fight like the other two brothers, Ars corrects the father, stating that Rosal will be trained as a strategist, something Rosal's father isn't so opposed to. As Ars enters Rosal's room, Ars apologizes for scaring Rosal earlier, asking if Rosal likes to read books. When Ars learns that Rosal is reading the only book his mother used to read for him, Ars feels sad for Rosal, seeing Rosal admit that he's aware he isn't as talented as others. But taking this opportunity, Ars offers Rosal to visit his home's library, promising that nothing will happen to Rosal. Hearing such a tempting offer, Rosal accepts, but as Ars gets closer, Rosal states that he wants his brothers to come along as well. As everyone enters through Ars' mansion, Rosal is frightened of the mansion's dog, but Ars states that Charlotte will show the two older brothers around, revealing that Charlotte is the leader of their mage corps. With the brothers excitedly following Charlotte, Ars and REITZ shows Rosal their library, a place that holds every book in Missian. Since Ars is busy, Ars leaves REITZ to look over Rosal, cutting to later that afternoon, where Ars rushes to check up on Rosal. Upon entering, Ars fears that Rosal left, but is surprised to learn Rosal is fast asleep, having knocked himself out from reading too much. REITZ states that Rosal was able to grasp concepts and words instantly, leading Ars to check Rosal's ingenuity stat, shocked to see his level is rising so quickly. Just then Marcus and Grottos return to pick Rosal up, adoring Rosal who is fast asleep, only to reveal that Rosal never learned how to read, as their mother used to read to Rosal. As Rosal wakes up, Ars asks how Rosal learned how to read, only for Rosal to reveal that he had matched his mother's voice with the words in the books she read, ultimately learning to read. Rosal also mentions that he can remember most things from when he was born, shocking everyone. That night, Ars wonders how they can convince Rosal to fight with his brain, cutting to the next morning where Ars asks for Rosal to capture a boar with traps instead of a bow and arrow. When the brothers wonder if such smart creatures can be trapped, but with some encouragement from Ars and his older brothers, Rosal promises to create a trap and impress his father. Unveiling several boars trapped, Rosal shyly mentions how he didn't want his father to be forced to hunt alone when the two older brothers left, so Rosal made use of the boar's tendency to charge at yellow objects, ultimately leading the boars to funnel into wooden cages. Not only did Rosal think about his father's future, Rosal also strung up herbs to deter motherboard and child boars from being trapped, even opening a small hole for the babies to escape if they get trapped. Rosal states that in order to keep the boars abundant, they would leave the mother and child boars alone, shocking their father as Rosal had foresaw and factored in everything. Without saying another word, Rosal's father orders Marcus and Grottos to take Rosal with them when they leave the next day, heading off without saying anything else. Breaking down, Rosal realizes that he may have done too much, heading home that night, only to stare out into the moon, reminding himself that his mother passed shortly after he was born. As Rosal blames himself for his mother's passing, Rosal suddenly overhears Marcus and Grottos chatting with their father on the roof. As the boys toast to the anniversary of their mother's passing, the older brothers wonder why their father was so cold to Rosal, but their father states that he failed to recognize Rosal for his talents. Rosal's father states that he doesn't blame Rosal for hating him, as that is what the father must do to atone for failing to raise Rosal, prompting everyone to begin shedding tears. The next day Ars arrives to pick up Marcus and Grottos, shocked to see Rosal will be joining them, coldly walking past his father. Before Rosal and the boys set off, Rosal turns to his father who has begun chopping wood, crying that he could never hate his own father, promising to grow and make his father proud. As his father cries tears of joy, Marcus and Grottos thank Ars for giving them a chance for a brighter future, prompting all three boys to promise to serve Ars diligently. With Raven reaching the age of 36 and Ars turning 9 years old, Raven has become sick more often, prompting Ars to offer to take over his father's duties, but Raven refuses. 1 year ago, the ruler of Misian had passed away, leaving everything to his younger son, Vasmark, but the older son Corin refused to accept such a fact. Corin was well known to be inferior than Vasmark, but since Corin had made a name for himself, the province of Misian was ultimately torn between the older and younger son, and to make things worse the neighboring province of Sites has begun to invade Misian. As Ars racks his brain to figure out a solution, we see several carriages passing through a forest, even through all the lightning storms. Seeing Ars conflicted, Raven tells Ars not to worry about the war and instead to worry about his future engagement, something Ars was not aware about. Rushing to the others, Ars tells them about his engagement news, but Charlotte simply teases Ars for not marrying her first. As Ars gets more annoyed, he suddenly learns that his fiancée is here to visit him, forced to greet his future wife. As the carriage door opens, Ars stiffens up, having never had a girlfriend before, but as his fiancée unveils her hood, she introduces herself as Licia Applied. Scanning her stats, Ars notes how pretty Licia is, but is shocked to see Licia has a diplomacy capacity of 100 and ambition of 80. Ars realizes that Licia is definitely cunning, wondering if Licia is planning something. Confused as to why Ars isn't saying anything, Licia gets curious, but is relieved believing Ars is simply infatuated with her beauty. Offering to show everyone around his home, Ars suddenly spots Reitz running by, prompting Licia's butler to become disgusted spotting a Malkin in the mansion, but Licia silences her butler, reminding her butler that Reitz is quite formidable, ordering her butler to apologize. With Ars shocked to see Licia standing up for Reitz, Ars continues to show her around the house, amazed that Licia is so comfortable speaking with all the maids and people in the mansion. As everyone sits down for a meal, Licia compliments the meat she has been served, getting Ars to reveal that the meat is from some boars they trapped, but Licia takes the chance to tease Ars for having sauce on his face. Ars remarks that Licia is a little too perfect, but upon hearing Licia compliment his hometown of Lamberg, Ars offers to show her around the next time it stops raining. As Licia smirks, Ars suddenly spots the rain stopping, shocked to learn that Licia had watched the clouds as they were traveling and deduced that it would only rain for a little bit. At the same time, Charlotte and Rosal eavesdrop on their conversation, with Rosal sensing something off about Licia, something Charlotte agrees with as she gets jealous seeing Licia so close with Ars. As Licia and Ars walk through town, Ars greets the townsfolk, introducing them to his future wife, but suddenly spots two men arguing. Running to see the commotion, only to learn that one of the customers had ordered Flame Magistone, but the shopkeeper instead sold the customer Sound Magistone. Ars fears that if he isn't able to resolve the issue, Licia will consider Ars useless, but just then Charlotte appears, threatening to men to settle down or else she'll blow everything up. Intervening, Licia diverts the conversation, instead bringing up how famous Charlotte is, getting Charlotte to stand down for now. Turning to Ars, Licia offers to resolve the situation, asking Ars to do her a favor afterwards. Approaching the men, Licia stops the men from fighting, introducing herself as Ars' future wife, temporarily stopping the men as they congratulate Ars. Licia suggests that the customer sell their sound stone to her, offering to pay a decent price for the stone, As for the shopkeeper, Licia offers to sell any amount of flame stone the shopkeeper is willing to buy. Licia also mentions how everything was R's idea, prompting both men to thank Rs, promising to use contracts next time, but Rs can't be more amazed at how smart Licia is. As the sun begins to set, Rs apologizes for having Licia follow him around town, but just then Charlotte butts in, praising Licia for earlier, but Charlotte still doesn't accept Licia as Rs's future wife. With Rs and Licia now alone, Licia cashes in on that favor Rs gave her, asking what type of girl Rs truly like. Completely caught off guard, Rs wonders what Licia is scheming, but knows that since Licia is far more smarter than him, Rs chooses to answer truthfully. Rs cries that he wants to marry someone that is truthful and honest, but without saying another word Licia and Rs head home, leading to later that night where Licia has dinner with everyone, followed by Charlotte putting on a magic show, only for everyone to head to bed. Since Licia is staying the night, Rs heads to bed early knowing that he'll have to entertain her tomorrow as well, but as he sits on his bed, he realizes that Licia had been waiting for him. Stopping Rs for screaming, Licia states that she wants to have an honest conversation with Rs, prompting Rs to serve up some tea. As Rs asks what Licia wants to talk about, Licia asks once again what Rs thinks of her, revealing that she has a knack of detecting what people think of her with a single glance, coupled with the ability to put people at ease with a few minutes of conversation. But Licia had noticed that Rs only grew more suspicious of her, the more time they spent together, wondering why Rs is so scared of her. Rs realizes that he had made Licia feel so sad all this time, choosing to reveal his appraisal eye that allowed him to see Licia's outrageous diplomacy and ambition stat, and that is what ultimately made Rs suspect Licia had an ulterior motive. Shocked to hear that, Licia admits that she is quite ambitious, shyly uttering that she strives to have a man fall in love with her, but seeing Rs freeze, Licia cries for Rs to say something. As Rs tries to fill in the awkward silence, Rs realizes that it's completely natural for a girl like Licia to strive to marry a powerful man, but Rs knows that neither his family nor himself can live up to Licia's expectations. Speaking up, Licia is finally happy to be able to read what Rs is thinking, stating that although Rs is not yet where he wants to be, Licia believes that Rs along with his family have the potential of becoming great and powerful in the future. Licia also mentions how the townsfolk treated Rs like their family, something Licia believes every lord should strive for, ultimately admitting that Rs is the one she wants to marry. As both Rs and Licia part ways for the night, Rs scolds himself for beginning so awkwardly, only to cut to Licia outside, also scolding herself for being awkward, but Licia is grateful she has finally found someone that she can speak truthfully with. Licia thinks about how she was born around scummy nobles who would lie to each other in order for their own benefit, but one day Licia had watched a female noble worm her way into a marriage with a powerful man. Licia had strived to marry the most powerful man she could find, using her skill to also lie and get on people's good side, initially planning on only befriending and using Rs. But as Licia spent time with Rs walking around Lamberg, Licia realized how genuine and kind Rs was, not only to her but to everyone no matter their status, ultimately falling in love with Rs. Licia states that she wants to know what type of future Rs plans on creating, vowing to crush those who stand in Rs' way, cutting to several days later where Rs is seen writing to Licia updating her on his life. As Rs thinks about the last time Licia had visited him, Rs gets shy knowing Licia is dead set on marrying Rs, but Rs writes that luckily Raven is recovering well and the current wars in Messina have quieted down a bit. With some more time passing, Rs learns that his father is getting weaker by the day, wishing for some more time to repay his father for all he's done. Elsewhere in the castle of REINCARNATES, we see an assassin successfully take the life of the old governor, but when the guards corner the assassin chooses to take his own life. Having heard the news, Raven sits with Rs and his party, asking Rosal what he thinks of the Mysian governor being assassinated. Rosal believes that there will be war soon, something Raven knew would happen, meaning the brothers Corin and Vasmark will finally start a war for the throne. Since the lord of the Canare district, Lord Lumera, will fight for the elder brother Corin, Raven states that they'll be fighting alongside Corin as well. Raven tells Reitz to prepare the troops, expecting a letter from Lord Lumera, but as Raven tries to get out of bed, he suddenly collapses. With the letter from Lumera arriving, Rs learns that Raven must gather his troops within 3 days, but Rs states that since his father is unable to get out of bed, he'll be the one to go in his father's place. As Rs and his party set out to the town of Canare, they greet the guard outside the castle, informing the guard that Rs will be representing Raven. When the guard questions if Rs is capable of taking over for Raven, Charlotte speaks up, making the guard realize that he's standing before Charlotte the Lady of Flames and Reitz the Reaper. As they are guided through the castle, Ars gets teased for being nervous, but they suddenly run into the headman for Lord Lumera, Menes Renard. With Ars introducing himself, Menes prays that Raven gets well, prompting Ars to scan Menes's stats, amazed that Menes is an above average for all attributes. Taking the opportunity, Menes attempts to offer REITZ and Charlotte a job, but they both refuse, having sworn loyalty to Ars. With Ars being guided to the official meeting room, Ars awkwardly introduces himself, but feels out of place when none of the elderly men speak up. Upon taking a seat at the table, the Lord of Kumie, Kral Orslo, speaks up, praising Ars for his confident entrance, someone Ars used to play with when he was younger. When Kral offers Ars some cookies, Ars notices another man glaring at him, but out of nowhere Lord Lumera enters the room, prompting everyone to get up and bow. Amazed by the aura that Lord Lumera Pyres emits, Ars scans Lumera's stats, noticing that Lumera doesn't necessarily boast any unique stats, but combined with Menes, they are quite the influential duo. Getting the meeting started, Lumera apologizes for the sudden meeting, but states that with war about to break out, they'll all be fighting alongside the elder brother, Corin. With Lumera confirming that there are no objections, Lumera reminds everyone that the province of Sites will try to attack during the war as well, officially ending the meeting. Having held in all his nerves, Ars lets out a sigh of relief, but realizes that Lumera is beside him, apologizing for his manners. Lumera reassures Ars not to be so stiff around him, praising Ars for walking in Raven's footsteps and growing an army to such a high caliber, especially only at the age of 11. With Lumera telling Ars he expects great things, Lumera takes his leave, prompting the other man to finally confront Ars. The man introduces himself as Hammond, the lord of the domain Torbakista, and also the father of Lycia. Wondering what Hammond wants to speak about, Ars learns that Hammond had heard that Ars had stopped writing to Lycia, apologizing as Ars had been spending time looking after Raven and thinking about the upcoming war. Hammond states that Lycia speaks highly of Ars, having been more open with her feelings recently, something Hammond had never seen before, as Lycia used to be more obedient, especially growing up amidst conflicts between nobles. Hammond states that he blames himself for allowing his daughter to suffer at such a young age, apologizing for forcing Ars to marry Lycia, but Ars reassures Hammond that he chose to take on Lycia's burden. With Hammond satisfied with Ars' response, Ars returns to tell Raven everything that transpired, confirming that they will be indeed fighting alongside the older brother. Seeing as Ars attended the meeting while telling him, Raven praises Ars for finally becoming a man, having worried that Ars was still too naive. Finally sitting down and writing a letter to Lycia, Ars catches Lycia up on everything that is occurring, talking about how he met Hammond, along with the unfolding war, but Ars ultimately promises to win the war to impress Lycia. Joining his men in training, Ars stands no chance against REITZ, worried that everyone but himself is growing stronger. Ars begins thinking about his mock battle he had earlier, disappointed to see that he was completely outmatched, and even failed to defend himself when attacked. Seeing as he has been relying on Charlotte and REITZ, Ars racks his brain, wondering how he can be useful in battle, but just then Rosal rushes in with a letter. Rosal reports that Sites has begun to invade Kumie, the domain belonging to Kral, and seeing as Kumie is right next to Lamberg, they have no choice but to defend Kumie. Knowing that Raven can't lead their army, Ars steals his resolve, declaring that they'll depart immediately, ordering REITZ to gather the troops. With REITZ promising to look after Ars, Ars declares that he'll be leading the army, but out of nowhere Raven appears. With Ars worried that his father is too unwell to fight, Raven states that Ars is still too young to fight, ordering REITZ to stand down when he tries to persuade Raven against going to war in his condition. When Ars tries to reassure Raven that he'll be safe with Charlotte and REITZ by his side, Raven reveals that Ars's face does not resemble a warrior just yet, confusing Ars. To make things clear, Raven orders Guller to retrieve one of the men they've imprisoned, having Baramorda the criminal kneel before everyone. Raven reveals that Baramorda had committed every crime under the sun, stating that they'll now execute the criminal, but tasks Ars with keeping his composure if Ars wants to be acknowledged as a man by Raven. Seeing Baramorda being placed in position for an execution, Ars helplessly listens as Baramorda begins listing off his fantasies, only for Raven to give the signal to execute the criminal. As Ars lays witness to the criminal's head being severed, Ars can't help but turn away, collapsing onto his knees, but this shows to Raven that Ars is still not ready for the horrors of war. As it begins to rain, Raven begins heading out with his army, ordering Ars's party to follow as well, leaving Ars by himself, crying out that he is still too weak. Cutting to the battlefield, REITZ rides beside Raven, all whilst Rosal gives orders and Charlotte decimates the battlefield with her magic. As Raven begins coughing up blood from the 1-month dispute, it's reported that Raven's army was able to defeat an army double their size, but unfortunately as Raven returns home, he's seen very weak, arriving 4 days after R's 12th birthday. With R's family rushing to check on Raven, Rs welcomes the others home, shocking everyone as Rs has been training whilst everyone was gone. Rs asks about his father's conditions, disappointed that he had forced his father to push his already sick body, but his party reassures Rs that it was Raven's duty to take over. As Rs leaves to train some more, Charlotte reveals that she had heard Rs has been non-stop training, something that stresses Rs' party out, but out of nowhere Licia visits, apologizing for the sudden visit. Licia states that she's been worried about Rs, having kept in touch with Rs through their letters, but Licia admits that she feels more distant from Rs as his written letters feel very cold. Seeing as Licia is distraught, REITZ reasons he should tell Licia about how Raven had tested Rs' manhood, ultimately left behind when Rs failed to face the horrors of taking another human's life. Licia apologizes for not even being able to help, demanding to speak with Rs herself, guided towards the training area of the mansion. Upon entering, Licia is relieved to see Rs focused with training, but when Rs collapses, Licia admires Rs for forcing himself back onto his feet, even though Rs is completely exhausted. With Licia leaving Rs to train, she tells everyone that she'll let Rs grow for now, but suddenly a maid rushes to inform everyone that Raven is awake, but Raven wishes to speak with Rs' party privately. As Rosal, REITZ and Charlotte stand before Raven, Raven apologizes for passing out after the war, shocking the three as Raven is too casual with them. Raven states that he wants to get to know the three better, asking what each of them feel living their new lives, prompting all three to state that they would like to continue living the life they have now. Happy to hear that, Raven reveals that he knows he is not long for this world, thanking the three for changing his worldview, as he had never thought a Malkin, a woman and a child would end up being the pillars of his domain. Getting serious, Raven states that he knows forcing Rs to rule over his domain is a selfish act, admitting that he wished he would have trained Rs more seriously, but now that he has no time left, Raven begs the three to please continue supporting and guiding Rs. As Raven makes this request as a father, Raven begins shedding tears, knowing that he can't look over Rs any longer. Reciprocating Raven's feelings, Rosal states that Rs is the person that ultimately brought his family together and gave him confidence. Charlotte adds that Rs is the person that gave her hope for the future, and REITZ declares that Rs believed in him when no one else will. With Raven satisfied to hear that all three swear complete loyalty to Rs, the three bow their heads, thanking Raven for accepting them, but REITZ asks for a favor. Having waited outside, Licia requests to speak with Raven privately, formally introducing herself, only to learn that Raven and herself have met before. Raven reveals that when he first met Licia, he noticed that Licia was more mature than most kids her age, even going as far as to treat everyone equally, someone Raven wanted by Rs' side. Raven reminds Licia that Rs isn't a perfect human, but Licia cries that Rs is trying as hard as he can to become like Raven, something Raven can't help but smile at, happy to see that Licia has indeed fallen in love with Rs. With Licia leaving Raven's room, she tells the others that Raven wishes to speak with Rs, but first thanks REITZ for being so kind to her. As everyone goes on ahead, REITZ slowly reminisces on the fond times with Raven, crying out in agony at the horrible situation. As Rs rushes to greet his father, Rs reports that he's been studying to find a cure for Raven's sickness, but Raven states that Rs truly has grown. Raven reveals that he was Rs' age when he became a warrior, having grown up in a farming village in the Messina province, under the rule of a corrupt tyrant. One day Raven had run away at 10, visiting the cities, only to lay eyes on the admirable lord of the town. From that day on, Raven trained his sword skills, climbing the ranks from a soldier to a lord only to finally be granted his own domain. As Raven begins thinking fondly of his past, Raven suddenly begins coughing profusely, reminding Rs that his poor health is not Rs' fault. With Rs holding back his tears, Rs declares that he will take over Raven's duties whenever Raven wants him to, impressing Raven as he sees Rs as more prepared than ever. When Raven apologizes for having Rs be burdened by everything, Rs reassures Raven that he's grateful to be Raven's son, spending the entire night learning about his father's history. As Rs and his family sit through the night telling stories to each other, we cut to the next day where Raven had finally passed away, the 212th year of the Summerfirth calendar, where everyone sends Raven off with a proper ceremony. During the ceremony, Rs calls for his siblings, cries and Ren to say goodbye to Raven, only for Rs himself to approach his father, placing a single flower on Raven's casket. Rs declares that he knows he's not as competent as his father, but Rs promises to take care of everyone just like Raven has been, asking for everyone to support him, prompting all the townsfolk to cheer Ars on. At the same time, Charlotte remembers a time during a battle where Raven had instructed Charlotte to save her energy for when she needs to fight alongside Ars. Rosal remembers a time when Raven had instructed Rosal to take it easy and not push himself so much, especially being a child. Licia thinks back on their chat the previous night, promising to remain by Ars' side, only for Ars to officially declare he'll be taking over as master of the Luvent house, prompting everyone to kneel before their new master. That evening, we cut into town where a lady is seen drunk, overhearing some men talk about the Missian brothers' most recent dispute over the throne, demanding to know more about the dispute. With 3 months passing since Raven's death, Ars visits Raven's grave, apologizing for not meeting Raven's expectations yet, but promises he'll make his father proud with the help of his allies. At the castle of Canera, Lumera, Kral and Hammond all pray out of respect for Raven's passing, only for Lumera to declare that Ars will now take over as head of the House of Luvent. As Ars declares that he'll do his best, Kral and Hammond both praise how much Ars has grown, only for Lumera to state that Ars is now their equal. Officially starting the meeting, Lumera reveals that the older brother Corin has finalized their army, meaning that the real war will begin soon, but Menes steps up to explain extra details. Menes states that the capital of Missian, REINCARNATES, is currently under rule by the younger brother Vasmark. Menes adds that although Vasmark currently has a bigger army than their forces, Corin still controls the trading city of Semplar, meaning that the brothers are still overall even. Menes states that both brothers will be trying to convince neighboring districts to join their side, noting how Pereina, the district to the west, refuses to choose either side. Menes reveals that Pereina holds the shortest route they could use to attack REINCARNATES, meaning it is a must for Lumera and the others to convince Pereina to side with them. Lumera says he's tried to convince Pereina before, stating that he plans to subjugate the district, but not wanting to resort to violence straight away. Ars asks for permission to try their own tactics at convincing Pereina. Cutting to several days ago, Ars and his party are seen analyzing the upcoming war, but Rosal points out how suspicious it is for the Pereina to remain where they are, even though Pereina knows they are quite vulnerable to invasions. Rosal advises Ars to check out the situation in Pereina first before they mindlessly march into enemy territory, prompting REITZ to suggest they hire mercenaries by the name of Shadows, a group of talented information gatherers. Ars mentions how Pereina seems suspicious to have rejected siding either side, even though they can be invaded at any time, convincing Lumera to give Ars some time to figure out what is happening. As the gang head through town exhausted, they run into the orphans Charlotte had been taking care of, amazed that they've grown so much. With Ars greeting the ladies that owned the orphanage, Ars reveals that he had instructed the ladies to take in as many orphans out on the street as possible, satisfied to see the orphans are growing up well. Charlotte asks her kids what they'll be doing when they grow up, amused to hear one wants to join Lumera's army, one wants to work as a maid in the Canera castle, one wants to work in a bakery and one wants to work on a farm in Lamberg. When the kids thank Ars for giving them a home, Ars reveals that Charlotte donates her salary to the kids every time, making Charlotte proud seeing that orphans now have a home to grow up in. Charlotte admits it was the right call to leave the kids in town, seeing as the capital has far more opportunities than if Charlotte housed the kids in Lamberg. Out of nowhere Licia appears, having been visiting the castle of Canera, but having heard that Ars was in town, Licia came to visit Ars. Ars thanks Licia for coming, but notes how he's not mentally ready to speak with her yet, but Licia admires Ars for creating a home for the less fortunate orphans. Out of nowhere an orphan rushes to hug Licia, accidentally dirtying her dress, but when Ars apologizes for causing Licia so much issues, Licia surprisingly removes her boots, chasing and playing with the kids, something Ars admires about Licia. As the gang stay the night at the orphanage, Licia asks what Ars has planned, learning that REITZ has managed to get in touch with Shadow, and Ars plans to negotiate with them tomorrow. Interested, Licia asks if she can accompany Ars tomorrow, shocking Ars as he fears Licia will get hurt, but Licia manages to convince Ars to let her join them. When Ars promises to pick Licia up the next day, Licia reveals that she'll be staying with Ars at the orphanage, scaring Ars, as Licia wants to share a bed with Ars, but this manages to wake Charlotte up, annoyed at how close Licia is getting with Ars. As REITZ rushes to report something to Ars, REITZ is shocked to see Charlotte and Licia fighting over Ars, but when Rosal tries to leave them alone, Rosal gets dragged into sharing a bed with the three, all whilst REITZ manages to escape. As the girls greet Ars the next morning, Ars and Rosal note how they failed to get any sleep, but suddenly REITZ notifies Ars that he's received a message from Shadow. With Ars and his party thanking the orphanage for the hospitality, they part ways with the kids, all spotting Charlotte proud of what she's helped build. Ars asks where they'll be meeting with Shadow, learning that their meeting point is outside of town in a bar, impressing Ars as REITZ had managed to make contact with them. REITZ reveals that his old mercenary group used to do work with Shadow, as REITZ's group specialized in frontline combat whereas Shadow focused on recon work. Hearing that Shadow also partakes in intelligence, espionage and assassinations, Ars gets terrified, but REITZ is more worried about Shadow's leader, having heard the leader was replaced by a younger bloke. Ars learns that the younger person has made Shadow the greatest they've ever been before, interesting Ars and Licia, but REITZ states that Shadow only takes jobs that interest them and money isn't the only factor. With the gang entering the bar, several female workers immediately swarm Ars, adoring how cute Ars is, but this annoys Charlotte and Licia. At the same time, an employee refuses to serve Ars and his party, stating that they're full at the moment, but REITZ rebuttals with a code phrase, prompting the employee to assign Ars and his party a table in the back. As the gang sit down, they all notice other customers glaring at them, but they decide to ignore everyone and order some food while they wait for Shadow to arrive. Beginning to scan the surrounding customers, Ars deduces that Shadow might be hiding amongst the crowd, but when Ars goes to order something from one of the waitresses, Ars suddenly freezes. Having scanned the waitress's stats, Ars apologizes, choosing to order some juice, only to head to the bathroom, but Licia knows Ars is acting strange. Calming himself down, Ars checks to see if his appraisal skill is working, but wonders why his eye assessed the waitress as having a prowess of 92, an ingenuity of 90 and is in fact a 22-year-old man. Out of nowhere, the waitress drags Ars into a nearby room with a knife, demanding to know how Ars knows he's the leader of Shadow. Luckily REITZ arrives, disarming and freeing Ars only to threaten the leader for attempting to harm Ars. The leader praises Ars for calling in backup, but Ars notes how he didn't, revealed to be Licia who asked REITZ to save Ars. Stepping up, Licia shames the leader for trying to harm Ars, suggesting that the leader help them out, but the leader refuses, wondering why he simply can't just kill everyone here and flee. Licia reveals that she knows the leader wouldn't be able to escape now that REITZ is here, but as Ars shakes seeing how serious everyone is, the leader asks what if he manages to escape, prompting Licia to state she'll devote her entire life hunting the leader down. Breaking into laughter, the leader admits that Licia has got him cornered, asking Ars how he knew who he was, but doesn't trust Ars when Ars says he has an appraisal eye. To prove it, Ars calls the leader Mazik, a name the leader threw away a long time ago, now going by the name Fam. Now convinced of Ars' skill, Fam agrees to take on any job Ars has to offer, stating that he knows Ars is quite interesting based on how much REITZ and Licia respect Ars. As Fam asks to speak more privately in the back, Ars thanks the two for saving him, learning that Licia had deduced the waitress was Shadow's leader based on Ars' shocked expression. As they all head to a more private room, Ars asks Fam to investigate Pereira, surprised to hear that Fam will take 1 gold for the job, agreeing to meet back within 5 days. Back with Charlotte and Rosal, Charlotte is seen devouring the food, both wondering why Ars' bathroom break is taking so long. As the trio return to the table, Ars tells Charlotte and Rosal that they just had a meeting with Shadow, surprising Charlotte as she wanted to meet Shadow herself. Just then, Fam appears in his waitress disguise, serving Charlotte and Rosal, only to leave without the two realizing that Fam was Shadow, something that terrifies Ars. Several days later, Ars and REITZ reunite with Fam, wondering where Fam's other workers are, shocked to hear that Fam took on Ars' job alone. Ars notes how Fam's overwhelming skills overrides his mediocre leadership skills, as people around him consider him the leader out of respect. With Fam confirming that he was indeed able to investigate Pereira's secrets, Ars wonders how Fam found the information so fast, handed a scroll with the reasons why Pereira won't side with Corin. Opening up the scroll, Ars realizes that it contains all the signatures of the nobles who have sided with the younger brother Vasmark, noticing Pereira as among the few. Additionally, Ars spots the Massa district as well, a district west within Mission and has a large population housing powerful infantry like the capital of Mission, REINCARNATES. REITZ mentions how they were told Massa had agreed to side with the older brother Corin just like Ars, but for some reason the scroll shows that Massa is now with Vasmark, implying that Massa had betrayed them. Ars knows that if they choose to invade Pereira, since Massa is right beside Pereira, Massa would simply use the chance to counter their invasion. Fam suspects that Pereira had already decided that siding with Corin is a losing battle, especially with Massa siding with Vasmark, but REITZ asks if Fam can reveal how he got the scroll, not 100% trusting Fam. Fam states that he doesn't share how he investigates things with anyone, reassuring REITZ that the scroll is authentic, but this prompts REITZ to glare at Fam. Understanding the situation, REITZ apologizes for doubting Fam, but Fam says it's fine since it's all business. With Ars amazed at Fam's ninja skills, Ars tries to pay Fam the rest of the money he owes, but Fam tells Ars to keep the money, apologizing for attacking him the other day. Grateful, Ars promises to do more business with Fam in the future, heading out to inform Lumera about Masa's betrayal. That night, Ars shows Lumera the document, surprising Lumera as Masa had always spoken highly of Korin. Knowing that they must act quick, Lumiere has Menes show Torbakista and Kumie the document, thanking Ars for his hard work. As Lumera asks Ars to help speak with Korin himself, Menes suddenly notices something off with the scroll, noting how the Masa seal doesn't seem authentic. Heading into a separate room, Menes shows off Masa's original seal, noting how the one on the document is similar but not exact. This leads Lumera to believe that Masa's seal was forged, tricking Pereina into siding with Vasmark. Lumera reveals that Menes has a unique skill that allows him to discern fine details, something Ars was not aware of since his eye doesn't allow him to see a user's stats. Ars wonders why someone would trick Pereina, but Reitz and Rosal deduce that the enemy plans to use Pereina to buy some time. Reitz mentions how if they invade Pereina without Masa will fall, but this will buy the enemy enough time to acquire the Explosion Magistones. Lumera reveals that Explosion Magic Stones are rare gems that can only be found within 3 districts, one of which being Pereina. Since the gems are very rare, having the ability to give mages powerful destructive spells can even be used to craft catastrophic weapons, meaning that Vasmark plans to use the chaos of Pereina being invaded to mine as much Explosion Magistones as possible. Hearing all of this, Rosal speaks up, stating that invading Pereina is no longer an option, as Vasmark plans on using Pereina to tire out Lumera's forces, therefore their goal should be convincing Pereina to side with them even though Pereina has been hesitant too. Several days later, we cut to the headman of Pereina, greeting Ars and his followers, who has come to announce that they want to side with Vasmark. Ars chooses to act shocked, having heard that Masa has planned to side with Vasmark, pleasing the headman as he utters that Ars and Lumera is wise to join the winning side. As the headman gets up to inform Vasmark of the great news, Ars asks how the headman acquired the document in the first place, learning that Vasmark handed the headman the document himself. Ars utters how Masa betraying Korin is quite random, but the headman mentions how things get messy during war, but not stopping Ars cries that the headman didn't confirm if Masa truly is siding with Vasmark. Annoyed, the headman realizes that Ars isn't really here to join Vasmark's side, having his men arrest Ars and his followers. Springing into action, Reitz buys Ars some time, allowing Ars to reveal that he has brought the headman of Masa himself to clear things up. Flashing back, we see that Rosal had planned to have the headman of Masa clear things up, leading to Ars and his party showing the headman of Masa the forged signature. Pissed that Vasmark would rely on such underhanded tactics, the headman of Masa agreed to visit Pereina personally, leading to the present where the headman for Masa reveals that his signature was indeed forged. The headman of Masa reminds Pereina that he has sided with Korin since he was brought to power and intends to die whilst serving Korin, demanding to know what side the headman for Pereina will now side with. The headman for Pereina admits that he should side with Korin now, afraid that Korin won't accept him after his betrayal, but the headman for Masa states that he's aware that both Masa and Pereina simply wants what is best for the citizens, forgiving the headman of Pereina for the betrayal but allows Ars to make the final decision. Surprised, Ars states it was a simple mistake, happy that the headman of Pereina figured out the truth before any unnecessary bloodshed. As the headman reports his realliance with Korin to Lumera, we cut to Ars telling his father about everything that transpired, happy to report that Pereina is now sided with Korin, but was shocked to what that Vasmark had still managed to acquire some Explosion Magistones. As Rosal and Reitz join Ars, they mention how cold it is, making Ars realize something. Staring off into the sunset, Ars thanks Reitz and Rosal for always staying by him, grateful to hear that Reitz and Rosal plan to serve Ars for the rest of their lives. Just then a maid informs Ars they have a visitor, surprised to see Lumera and Menes is here to pray for Raven. Out of nowhere, Lumera reveals that Lord Korin wants to speak with Ars, terrifying Ars as Korin is a powerful figure, but with Rosal and Reitz encouraging Ars, Ars musters up the courage to meet Korin. Back at the mansion, Charlotte wonders what dress she should wear for the upcoming party, horrified to hear that Ars and the others have left. Following the carriage transporting Ars and his party, Rosal wonders if they should have left Charlotte behind, but Reitz reminds Rosal that they don't really have a choice. As Reitz checks on Ars is clearly shaken up, completely stiff at the thought of meeting Korin, especially since Korin could become the next governor of Missian. Calming his nerves, Ars asks why they are meeting Korin at a party, learning that Korin is holding a party with powerful nobles all across his city of Semplor. As Rosal notes how Corin probably plans to raise morale before war, Ars states he must not mess up at such an important event, but upon glancing out the window bear witness to the lovely trading city of Semplor. Spotting the castle above a hill, along with the ocean and hundreds of carriages, Ars states that he'll make Lamberg as vibrant as Semplor one day, reminded by REITZ that the party will be a great opportunity to get his name out. With the party beginning, Ars and his group march alongside Lumera and Menes, trying to keep a straight face, but can't help overhearing several nobles gossiping about a child amongst their ranks. Just then, Lumera is stopped by several nobles, impressing Ars as Lumera is just as influential as Ars had imagined. Taking the chance, Lumera introduces Ars, impressing the nobles as Ars is so young to be a lord just like them. With a trumpet being sound, everyone bows their heads, right as Lord Corna enters. As Corin greets everyone, Ars takes the chance to scan Corin's stats, blown away at the sheer power Corin holds. Ars remembers that there are rumors that Lord Vassmark is supposed to be superior to Corin, wondering if there is some trick that Vassmark is relying on, wondering if Corin can truly be defeated. As Corin descends some stairs, he thanks everyone for gathering at his party, reminding everyone that since the passing of his father, himself and his younger brother have now chosen to fight over the throne. Corin claims that Vassmark is corrupt, choosing selfish desires over what is best for the province of Misian. Using this chance, Corin declares that after the war, he plans on converting the Misian province into an independent nation, separate from the Empire of Summerfirth. Corin admits that their future will be tough, but he trusts that his allies will support him fully, gaining a massive cheer of admiration from the crowd. Locking eyes with Ars in the crowd, Corin asks for Ars to step up, officially introducing himself to Ars, only to ask Ars to stand beside him. Corin reveals that Vassmark had attempted to trick Pereina, but thanks to Ars they were able to convince Pereina to side with them, shocking the nobles as a mere child was able to uncover such a ploy. Corin reminds everyone that age doesn't affect one's status, reminding everyone that Ars has accomplished great things in little time, earning Ars an applause from everyone. With some time passing, Rosal and REITZ dine on the delicious food, prompting the two to deliver some food to Ars, but Ars is too exhausted from meeting everyone, heading outside for some fresh air. As Ars begins thinking about all the duties he has as a lord, Corin suddenly appears, frightening Ars, but Corin reassures Ars he simply wants to have a chat. Corin praises Ars having heard great things from Lumera but is more curious about Ars' eye that has led him to forming his group of talented retainers. Corin asks Ars what he thinks about his own men, flashing back to several minutes ago when Ars had scanned the stats of the men that Corin surrounds himself with. Ars thinks about how Corin's men don't exhibit any extraordinary stats, quietly telling Corin that his men aren't as talented as Corin thinks. Glaring at Ars, Corin reveals that he knows his men aren't talented, but Corin values their loyalty the most. Getting serious, Corin states that he alone can't win the war, reminding Ars that although they have greater military and funding, they will still lose if their leaders are incompetent. Corin states that he was excited to hear such a young boy like Ars was able to unmask Vassmark's scheme so easily, promising to make Ars the headman of Canair if Ars impresses him during the war. Ars is shocked, not wanting to take Lumera's current position of headman of Canair, but Corin reveals that it's about time Lumera was promoted from headman of Canair. Before Corin heads off, he asks Ars if Ars' retainers can work for him instead, but is amused to hear how much Ars treasures his party, inviting Ars to his next war council, hoping to test Ars' appraisal eye a little more. With Ars proud to see Corin expects great things from him, we cut to the castle of REINCARNATES, where Vassmark is informed that his plan of having Pereina stall Corin has failed. Thomas and Remus, being Vassmark's retainers, reassure Vassmark that they've still managed to acquire Magistones plus their army is still greater than Corin's, but Vassmark is still furious, refusing to initiate the war until he's absolutely sure of victory. Changing topics, Vassmark asks where Mireille is, but Thomas states that he refuses to speak to her, especially being the hopeless drunk she is. As other nobles begin uttering that Mireille would be useless in war, we cut back to Ars and his party who have returned home, informing Charlotte that they've been invited to attend Corin's council meeting. As Charlotte munches on some snacks from the party, Ars wonders how he'll find some more talented people, agreeing to consult with Fam. Meeting up with Fam, Ars asks if Fam could find him some more talented people, promising to reward Fam with 20 extra gold if he succeeds. As Ars leaves to meet up with his party, Ars suddenly bumps into a drunk woman who apologizes for bumping into Ars, drunkenly stumbling into Fam's tavern. Fam attempts to turn the drunk lady away, but the lady randomly sees through Fam's disguise, asking for a job at the tavern, but this alerts the manager who recognizes the lady as Mireille. Pham learns that Murray and the manager used to drink together, but now Murray is homeless and poor, hoping for a job, but the manager refuses. Before the manager can shoo away Murray, Pham intervenes, suggesting that Murray joins them as a waitress, but on the first day, Murray can't help but get orders wrong and drink on the job. When Murray's first day of work is over, she begs the manager to serve her a meal, but when the manager refuses, Pham manages to convince him otherwise. Sitting down for a chat, Pham asks what Murray did in the past, learning that Murray did odd jobs whilst indulging in booze, but when Pham tries to pry for more information, Murray gets serious warning Pham to back off. Holding his ground, Pham wonders how Murray knew he was a boy, but Murray reveals that her little brother and herself used to serve a powerful man, uttering the name Amador Salamikaya, the previous governor of Missian. Hearing this, Pham states that he has a perfect job for Murray, cutting to later that day when Ars and his party receive a letter from Pham, informing them that he's found a new talent for them. Upon rushing to the front door, Ars is greeted by Pham, who introduces Murray, but Ars immediately recognizes Murray as the drunk lady he bumped into yesterday. When VIDZ asks who the lady is, Pham reveals that Murray is on par with VIDZ's combat ability, but being skeptical himself, Ars scans Murray's stats, terrified to see her monstrous stats. With a leadership stat of 93, a prowess stat of 70, a 102 ingenuity stat that is greater than Rosal's and an ambition stat of 100 compared to Lycia's mere 80. With Ars speechless, he musters up the courage to chat with Murray, shocking VIDZ as he recognizes Murray as the advisor of the previous governor of Missian, Amador Salamikaya. With Charlotte impressed by Murray's aura, Ars wonders why Murray is showing up now, but just then Rosal tugs on Ars' clothes. VIDZ follows up by advising Ars not to hire Murray, revealing that Murray has rumors of her being kicked from the previous governor's home, and Murray Grangen has a younger brother, Thomas Grangen, the right-hand man of Vassmark. VIDZ states that Thomas is said to be more cunning than Murray, but Murray could still be acting as a spy for Vassmark, something that Murray denies, surprised to learn that Thomas is now working under Vassmark. With VIDZ not convinced by Murray's clueless expression, Murray asks if Ars will be hiring her, leading Ars to declare that he will be in need of Murray's help. Ars states that Murray is quite talented overall, but secretly thinks about why Murray's ambitions are so high, similar to Lycia's, but Ars's compliments make Murray blush. With several days passing, VIDZ storms into Ars' room, stating that Murray is not fit to be Ars' retainer, having slept through her duties, gotten drunk during training and refused to respect VIDZ as an equal. Before Ars can defend Murray, Rosal bursts through the door, complaining that he doesn't want to learn under Murray anymore, having been forced to run laps instead of studying. Out of nowhere, the ground begins to shake, alerting everyone to a possible attack, but when Ars heads outside, he spots Charlotte and Murray destroying the ground. When Ars demands to know what happened, Charlotte explains that Murray instructed her to go all out, putting Ars in a tight place as he trusts Murray's training but asks for a heads up next time they cast powerful spells. Speaking up, the mansion's maids and knights argue that Murray has done nothing but cause more problems for everyone, but when they ask for Ars' opinion, Ars once again asks that everyone try to get along with Murray. Surprised, Murray admits that she doesn't want to leave, catching Ars off guard as he learns that the previous governor and Ars were the only people that trusted her and gave her a home. Seeing as there is doubt regarding her abilities, Murray suggests they have a mock battle, to prove her usefulness as a retainer, but this scares Ars as everyone is curious as to how strong Murray truly is. Gathering his troops, Ars wonders why Lycia has joined them, surprised to hear that Lycia came right away upon hearing that Ars was holding a mock battle. Murray takes the chance to introduce herself to Lycia, but Lycia passively-aggressively accuses Murray of being lazy and useless, forcing Ars to step in and defuse the situation, but when Murray offers to marry Ars notices Lycia glaring at them. Cutting to the chase, Ars explains that their mock battle will consist of 2 teams of 50, with the battle being held in the eastern region of the nearby forest until sundown and the team with more kills will win. Ars adds that a team can win by wiping out all the soldiers or simply taking out the enemy general, and that wooden swords will be used, with a kill being acquired when a soldier is struck in the head or chest. Seeing as Charlotte's fire magic would be too dangerous, Ars forbids the use of fire magic, handing Charlotte some vials of sound and light magic instead. Annoyed, Charlotte uses the vials straight away, but this leads Ars to announce that he'll be joining Murray's team to test her skills, but gets surprised seeing everyone else refuses to join Murray's squad. With Ars' party also choosing to face off against Murray, one of the older soldiers assigns some newbie soldiers onto Murray's team, something Murray is completely fine with, but Ars terrified seeing how much everyone despises Murray for drinking before their mock battle. As everyone heads out to their designated destinations, REITZ states that he refuses to accept Murray as an equal, something Rosal agrees with, fearing that Murray will simply add to the dominating presence Charlotte and Licia already exudes. Cutting to R's team, Ars tries to cheer his team on, but Murray once again spoils the mood with her drinking. Seeing Ars growing worried about REITZ's strong team, Murray compliments REITZ, impressed by how REITZ moves. Murray also mentions how powerful Charlotte is, wondering how Ars found them, but is amused to see how proud Ars is of his friends. Murray admits that their troops don't even compare to REITZ soldiers, but as the junior soldiers and Ars scold Murray for being so blunt, Murray corrects herself, declaring that they'll still win. Murray admits that their lack of synergy and experience is a pity, but Murray reminds everyone that as a strategist she'll ensure that they win even if they hate her. With a crowd of spectators spotting Ars's team's smoke signal to start the duel, we see REITZ's team has already prepared for what Ars's team may try. REITZ reminds everyone that they suspect Ars's team will try several long-range attacks and ambushes, therefore their strategy is to simply meet them head-on and outpower them. REITZ reveals that himself and Rosal will follow the same path in two separate groups, and when Rosal's group is targeted for being the leader, Rosal will signal for help and REITZ will use the chance to counterattack. Cutting to Licia amongst the spectators, Licia praises REITZ's and Rosal's clever plan, wondering how Murray and Ars will overcome their enemies. With REITZ and his men heading through the forest, they suddenly hear Rosal's signal, rushing towards the sound, but upon seeing some rustling in a nearby bush, they're surprised to spot a mage from Murray's team all alone. When the mage asks to join REITZ's team, REITZ gets skeptical, but gets intrigued when the mage offers to reveal Murray's plan. The mage explains that Murray planned to have Ars and the junior soldiers convince REITZ that their mansion was being attacked, guiding REITZ towards the training area, only for Ars and Murray to take the chance and isolate Rosals and defeat the leader. With everyone surprised that Ars would follow such a bold tactic, REITZ calls out the mage for lying, knowing Ars to be way more honorable than that, but seeing as she has been caught, the mage admits that she was simply stalling for Murray. The mage admits that she despises Murray, choosing to reveal Murray's actual plans, stating that the plan is to lure REITZ towards a location and the mage will signal with some sound magic to ambush REITZ's party. As the mage hands over her wand to REITZ, REITZ immediately orders for his men to detain the mage, discovering a second wand hidden on the mage. When the mage tries to act innocent, REITZ's glare forces the mage to admit that she had always planned to betray REITZ, but REITZ does thank the mage as REITZ now plans on heading to the location and countering Murray's ambush. With REITZ and his men rushing towards their destination, they're worried about Rosal being left alone, but suddenly REITZ spots several of Ars soldiers waiting out in the open. Giving the signal, REITZ and his soldiers rush Ars' army, but they realize they've been tricked. Appearing out of nowhere, Ars compliments Murray's scarecrow trick, but they suddenly spot REITZ pissed, prompting Murray to pick up Ars, dashing away as REITZ's anger forces him to blindly chase after the duo. As the crowd watching atop the hill cheers on REITZ, Ars gets worried seeing REITZ and his arm slowly catching up, but Murray isn't concerned. Sensing something off, REITZ has some of his men speed up, but Murray had set up several traps, tripping, catching and binding some of REITZ's men. With Ars impressed by Murray's clever traps, Ars spots REITZ escape from Murray's traps, even more pissed as REITZ and his men are now more passionate than ever. Seeing as it's almost time, Murray has Ars plug both their ears, followed up by several sound magic that erupts across the forest. With all of REITZ's army temporarily paralyzed, REITZ hones in on the surrounding, barely spotting Murray and Ars only to continue his chase. Impressed that REITZ and his army is still on their tail, Murray notes how she still hasn't received a signal from their remaining squad yet, but at the same time on the hill Lucia gets jealous seeing how close Ars is to Murray, but wonders where Ars' remaining squad is. Elsewhere in the forest, we see Charlotte escorting Rosal, but Charlotte wonders why they're walking further away from REITZ. Rosal deduces that REITZ must have rushed off due to an emergency, therefore their best course of action is actually to stay hidden until REITZ can sort out the things on their end. Out of nowhere, some of Ars' armies appear, signaling to Ars that they've found Rosal with some light magic, but Rosal notes how only half of Ars' army is with them. With Rosal ordering for his small army to attack, Rosal's knights begin to get cocky, seeing as they'll easily pummel the younger knights, but out of nowhere the younger knights reveal that the remainder of their army have Rosal's party surrounded. With the younger knights now overwhelming Rosal's army, Rosal realizes that Murray and Ars is all alone, cutting to Murray where she utters that REITZ and Rosal will most likely form groups of their own. Therefore Murray plans to lead REITZ and his men far away from Rosal, allowing for all of the younger knights to overwhelm Rosal and Charlotte. With Rosal realizing that they'll eventually lose, Charlotte takes the lead, dragging Rosal away as the older knights stall. Charlotte states that they have to meet back up with REITZ, therefore they too must stall until REITZ takes out Murray, casting several sound spells to temporarily stun the younger knights. Hearing another large bang, Murray smiles now knowing exactly where Charlotte and Rosal are, but REITZ is confused as to why Rosal is so close to them, cutting to Charlotte who has knocked herself out whilst disarming some of the younger knights. With Rosal forced to flee from the remaining younger knights, Licia realizes that Murray had perfectly laid a trap, not only leading REITZ away from Rosal, but also placing Rosal right in front of her, a magnificent plan that Licia rushes to see the conclusion of. At the same time REITZ finally realizes Murray is heading towards Rosal, crying that he refuses to lose, but Murray simply speeds up all whilst Ars struggles to hold on. Thinking of all his memories with Ars, REITZ refuses to let Ars down, managing to slowly close the gap, but at that moment Rosal is seen in the distance running towards Murray. With no other choice, REITZ orders Rosal to continue running towards them, promising to defeat Murray, but out of nowhere Ars releases several explosive spells to distract REITZ. Holding back the pain, REITZ powers through the smoke, readying to strike Ars down, but as everyone comes to a halt, it's revealed that Murray managed to strike Rosal first before REITZ could land a hit on Ars. Seeing Murray nonchalantly celebrating, Ars is amazed at how powerful and smart Murray is, officially announcing that Murray's team managed to defeat REITZ's team. Hearing his soldiers bicker about Murray using underhand tactics, REITZ scolds his army for not taking the battle seriously, reminding his men that during war there are no rules. REITZ admits that it was ultimately his fault that they lost, stating that he plans to accept and learn from Murray's battle experience, something Rosal agrees with. Manning up, REITZ calls out to Murray, apologizing for underestimating her, prompting Rosal and Charlotte to join in. Happy to hear such things, Murray admits that she was amazed to see REITZ surpass her own speed, noting how Charlotte would have easily wiped their team if she went all out, but most importantly Murray praises Rosal for putting distance between himself and REITZ, as any more time would have resulted in REITZ catching up and Murray's defeat. Finally Murray turns to Ars, blown away by the talent that Ars had gathered, suspicious of what Ars has planned for the future. Shyly, Ars reveals that he first wants to create a domain that will welcome anyone and can survive the horrors of war, surprising Murray as realizes Ars prefers avoiding war where possible. Hearing Ars' ideals, Murray suggests that Ars become emperor, suddenly reminding Ars of when Raven had also suggested that Ars would need to become the emperor if Ars wanted to ensure peace was brought across the continent. As night falls, Ars holds a party for their mock battle being a success, leading everyone to enjoy some delectable food and drinks outside the mansion. Amongst the crowd, Murray is seen out drinking several men, all curious as to what type of drinking monster Muriel truly is, but taking the opportunity the soldiers ask if Murray could train them. Surprised, Murray reveals that REITZ's training regimens are already as effective as possible, meaning Murray has nothing more to teach as REITZ has already shaped everyone into above-average soldiers. Off to the side, Murray spots Rosal replaying the mock battle, realizing that if he had trained to run like Murray had instructed him to, REITZ and himself would have won the mock battle. Murray confirms Rosal's hypothesis, reminding REITZ that although a strategist doesn't need to be as strong as normal fighters, a dead strategist is as good as useless. With Rosal declaring that he'll train harder, Charlotte suddenly collapses onto Rosal, pinning him to the ground. But seeing as this is the perfect chance, Murray asks that Charlotte light several spells behind Rosal to encourage Rosal to run faster, terrifying Rosal. Seeing everyone getting along with Murray, Licia apologizes to Ars for getting jealous at how close Ars was to Murray, but Licia states that she now accepts Murray as an ally. With Ars deep in thought, REITZ suddenly marches towards Ars, prompting Licia to give the two some space, but REITZ takes the chance to apologize for failing to lose the mock battle. When Ars tries to cheer REITZ up, REITZ scolds himself for failing to meet Ars' expectations, but Ars reminds REITZ that they still have time to grow even stronger. Seeing Licia finally chatting with Murray, Ars continues to wonder how strong Murray is, but wonders what REITZ thinks about Ars being emperor. Without skipping a beat, REITZ states that he completely agrees with Murray, promising to carve a path and support Ars all the way. With the next morning arriving, Ars promises to keep Licia updated as Licia returns back to her hometown, but at the same time Murray is scolded for slacking on the job as usual. The season ends with everyone more motivated than ever to improve, suddenly hearing that Ars and his party have all been summoned to Curran's War Council meeting, something Ars hopes to conquer with his new talented group of retainers. Picking up from the previous season, we follow Ars and his party as they all ride towards the war meeting, but Ars can't help but ask Charlotte and Murray to stop messing around. Seeing the girls enjoying the scenery, Ars gives the girls some space, checking on REITZ and Rosal. Hearing REITZ recommend they spend some time during the journey to relax, the carriage passes by an ocean heading towards the Semplar region. Seeing as Charlotte has never seen the ocean before, the gang decided to stop and dip their toes in the sea. But when Murray sees Charlotte acting all cute, she can't help but tease Charlotte. Charlotte takes the chance to ask about the places Murray's traveled, learning that Murray's been to volcanic, snowy and even ancient biomes, something that intrigues Charlotte. Joining them, Ars promises to take the gang all over the world once the world is over, all spending more time in the ocean, but when Charlotte fires off a spell into the ocean to hunt fish, the gang are forced to flee the scene. Having finally arrived at Castle Semplar, the gang arrive at the meeting area for the war meeting, but the other lords pay no attention to Lord Ars since he only mounts a remote piece of land. Spotting Lumera and Menes, Ars is so happy to see familiar faces, making some small talk, but out of nowhere Corin himself appears to greet Ars. Seeing Murray with Ars, Corin can't help but voice his surprise, having not spoken with Murray ever since she rejected Curran's offer to join his army. Murray states that she only came because of Ars, impressing Corin as he appreciates Ars for convincing the almighty Murray to join them. Seeing all the chatter, the other lords remind Corin that Murray is siblings with Vasmark's right-hand man Thomas, fearing that Murray will betray them. Silencing the skeptics, Corin states that since Ars trusts her, they should all as well, especially since Murray served the previous governor before he was assassinated. Starting the meeting, Corin recounts that their current army numbers 110,000, but the enemy houses 20,000 more. Since their side has Semplar under control, they'll have more access to resources, but rumor has it that most neutral lords are siding with Vasmark due to the enemy's talented commanders. Seeing as neither side has a major advantage, Corin declares that they want to finish the war as fast as possible. Speaking up, a lord suggests they conquer Bertudo first, seeing as it's one of the three great cities alongside Semplar and Arcontes. The lord suggests that they overpower Bertudo in order to seize more land and convince more neutral lords to join their side, rallying votes from other lords. Although Ars thinks it's a fine idea, Ars checks to see his party's and Curran's expressions, all agreeing that they can definitely do better. Turning to Murray and REITZ, Ars asks that they both speak their minds, prompting Murray to insult the lords for agreeing to such a basic attack. As Corin stops the lords from insulting Murray, Murray reminds everyone that Thomas is quite a perfectionist when it comes to schemes, only acting upon a plan with 100% success rate. Having seen the lords speak, Murray predicts that the enemies would win 70% of the time. Before the lords can say anything, Murray explains that the moment they march their army towards Bertudo, the enemy will immediately invade Semplar, forcing their forces to be split between defending Semplar and invading Bertudo. Scolding the lords for arrogantly underestimating the enemies, Corin praises Murray for shooting down such a basic plan. Murray calls for Rosal to offer up his plans, but upon seeing that a mere child will create a battle strategy, the lords grow agitated. Laying out his strategy, Rosal states that attacking Bertudo isn't a bad idea, but they should guarantee that Semplar isn't invaded when they're gone. Rosal suggests that they scare the enemy by having Paradil threaten an attack from the north, shocking Corin. Hearing this, the lords state that Paradil is loyal to the imperial family, therefore they won't be picking sides. Countering, Rosal states that they can bribe the emperor to sway Paradil onto their side. The lords fear that the emperor can't be bribed with mere money, but REITZ butts in, reminding everyone that the emperor is a teenager surrounded by corrupt retainers, therefore they need to bribe the retainers making all the decisions for the emperor. Having laid out everything, Murray praises Rosal for his genius plan, something Corin agrees with as he declares that they'll all be following Rosal's plan. Putting Ars in charge and Lumera to assist, Ars can't help but garner glares from all the lords in the room, but the gang head out to celebrate a job well done. During the meal, Ars can't help but stress at the thought of failure, but is relieved as he says REITZ will handle the negotiations with the emperor. Sadly, REITZ suggests someone else, knowing that he'll be discriminated against by royals. Seeing as no one else is willing to do it, they all head to visit Lycia, greeting Hammond as well. Before Ars can divulge any of the specifics, Lycia drags the boys in to hold a celebratory welcome. Wrapping up the party, REITZ apologizes for showing his presence in front of a lord, but Hammond reminds REITZ that since both Lycia and Ars respect REITZ, he is welcome in his home anytime regardless of race. Elsewhere, Lycia shows Ars a gorgeous view of her town, revealing that Ars has inspired her to interact with the townsfolk more often. Before Lycia can pull any moves on Ars, Lycia suddenly remembers something, taking Ars to a greenhouse only to show off all the flowers she planted gifted by Ars. Seeing as this is the perfect time, Lycia asks why Ars is visiting, stating that she will decide what Ars wants from here without her father intervening. As Ars asks Lycia to negotiate with the Emperor, Ars is surprised to hear Lycia gladly accepts, but asks for something in return. Happy to reward Lycia with anything, Ars is shocked to hear Lycia ask Ars to marry her after the war, but seeing as Lycia has helped out so much, Ars apologizes for not manning up sooner. Turning the question around, Ars instead asks Lycia to marry him now, knowing that he'll need her by his side throughout the war, bringing Lycia to tears. As both embrace, they announce the special news to Hammond and Reeds, but Hammond is against her daughter getting married so soon. Upon further inspection, Hammond sees that Lycia is more determined than ever to support Ars, ultimately giving in as he throws a massive feast in celebration. Later that day, Pham reports his findings on the corrupt people around the Emperor, pointing out that Minister Shakma is the one that holds the most power. Calling a meeting, Ars explains that they'll first all be heading to Semplar, only to take a boat to the royal capital. It's then where they'll have Minister Shakma attend their negotiations with them and Paradil, only to finish with speaking to the province as a whole. Ars states that Lycia will spearhead the negotiations, but Marae reminds Ars that Lycia is still a mere child, therefore Lycia reveals that Lumera will be accompanying them as well to convince everyone they can be trusted. Marae is impressed that a smart girl like Lycia is marrying Ars, but Charlotte voices her objections to Lycia and Ars marrying before the war. Lycia sneaks in some compliments, convincing Charlotte to approve of their marriage, only for Ars to remind Charlotte that their boat ride will allow Charlotte to experience the greater world. With Ars, Lycia and Charlotte heading out by carriage, Charlotte takes the chance to squeeze in a quick nap, but at the same time Ars notices someone riding beside. Relieved to see it's Pham, Ars learns that Pham has discovered Vasmark is now working with the province of Sites, fearing that Corin will eventually be pinched from two separate sides. Seeing as they have another issue on their hands, Lycia cheers Ars up, stating that once they've sided with Paradil, they'll have equal manpower to combat Sites and Vasmark. Completely amazed by how much Lycia had planned, the carriage suddenly hits a bump, revealing various diplomacy textbooks Lycia had been studying. Embarrassed, Lycia admits that she has been working hard to impress Ars, especially since now Lycia is Ars' wife. Before Ars and Lycia can share a moment, Charlotte wakes up breaking up the tension. Having arrived to Semplar the next day, Corin reports that Sites has indeed sided with Vasmark, but Lycia mentions how they've already planned for that. Lycia says they plan on teaming up with Paradil, and only then will they try negotiating Sites onto their sides as well, impressing Corin as Ars' party seems to be in top condition. Taking the chance, Corin teases Ars for being such a ladies' man, suddenly interrupted by Renge Salamikaya, Corin's oldest son. With Renge greeting Ars and Lumera, Renge wonders if they should really be trusting children with their future, but Corin asks Renge to be more respectful, sending him away. As Renge leaves, Ars quickly scans Reng's stats, but Corin asks if they could speak for a moment. Heading outside, Corin asks what Ars thinks of Renge, admitting that he was quite light of Renge when he was younger, but now Corin fears his son won't be a competent ruler. Ars reassures Corin that although Renge is quite useless at the moment, Renge has lots of potential to grow into a great man. Finally heading to Semplar's harbor, Charlotte can't help but admire all the shops and the goodies they sell, prompting Ars to encourage Lycia to have a browse around as well. Having found some gifts for the children at the orphanage, Ars checks on Lycia, who seems to be admiring a pendant, immediately purchasing the item as a proxy gift for their marriage, promising to give Lycia a proper ring in the future. Beginning to board the ship, Ars thanks Lumera once again for accompanying them, but is surprised to learn Renge is joining them, wanting to impress his father during their trip. As the ship sets sail, Charlotte is infatuated by their form of transportation, but Ars and the others begin to grow sick, watching as Renge fails to hold back from throwing up. Spotting several men floating at sea, the gang decide to rescue them, surprised to hear they had been floating in the ocean for several days. Feeling bad for them, Charlotte reminds everyone of pirates in the area, handing the men some water, but suddenly one of the men grabs hold of Charlotte, only to hold her captive whilst demanding for loot. Unfortunately, the men are unaware of Charlotte's magical capabilities, terrified seeing Charlotte melt their swords, only for Charlotte to blast them with a fireball. Tying up the men, Renge declares that the men will be hanged once they reach the capital, but having scanned them, Ars asks who the men truly are, suspecting that they aren't pirates. The men reveal that they are actually fishermen for the capital, but over time they began needing money to repair and sustain their business, forced to borrow money from a sketchy merchant once the empire refused to support them. As a result, the fishermen needed another way to repay their debts for their families, but Renge refused to listen to any of the fishermen's excuses. Relieved to hear the men aren't bad people, Ars offers to give the men some items worth 3 gold coins, confusing Renge, but the fishermen refuse to stoop so low and accept Ars's pity. Ars corrects the men, stating that his gift is simply a loan, allowing the fishermen to repay him whenever they want without interest, surprising everyone. Hearing this, Renge refuses to allow Ars to do such a thing, but Ars finally snaps, asking whether a lord can really earn trust from their people if the people can't trust their leader. Renge wonders why Ars is so optimistic, but Ars simply states that he has full trust that the men have good intentions, something Renge calls out as simply ignorance. As the men are set free, they wonder how gullible Ars truly is, all watching as the fishermen sail off. Arriving at the imperial capital, the gang are immediately mortified to see so many homeless lining the streets, all whilst the nobles enjoy luxurious lives, both living in separate worlds. Before the big day tomorrow, Licia asks for Ars to leave without her, needing time to prepare. The next day, everyone meets up only to wonder what Licia has been up to, shocked to see Licia in a fancy-looking dress. Licia states that everything will make sense later, all heading into the castle, only to greet Minister Shakma. Scanning his stats, Ars is amazed to see such high ingenuity, diplomacy and ambition stats, something Pham had warned them about. Knowing that Ars has come to negotiate, Shakma asks that they not waste any time, all sitting down to have a chat. When Renge tries to leverage his status as a means to negotiate, Shakma reassures Renge that his status means nothing, and money is the only thing that is worth discussing. Having anticipated this, we cut back to 2 days ago where Licia explains that they must bribe Shakma with their existing 2,000 gold coins, but they must avoid a scenario where Shakma demands more since it'll stall negotiations and give the enemy more time to invade. Licia declares they must trick Shakma into believing he is getting a bargain, cutting back to the present where Licia offers 500 gold to start. Reminding that he speaks for the emperor, Shakma states that he'll accept no less than 5,000 gold coins, but Licia laughs, suspecting 5,000 gold is more gold than what the empire makes in a year. Licia offers 800 this time, but Shakma calls Licia's bluff, beginning to walk away. Desperate, Licia cries that 1,000 gold is the furthest they can muster, catching Shakma's attention as he agrees to 1,000 gold. With everything going according to Licia's plan, Renge suddenly reveals that they have 2,000 gold, pissing off Shakma as he realizes he was almost deceived. When Ars tries to rectify the situation, Shakma states he'll accept the 2,000 gold and an extra sum as an apology, but seeing Ars freeze up, Shakma simply leaves. Ars scolds Renge for being so stupid and revealing their actual budget, but Renge states that he didn't want Semplar to seem so poor, both silenced by Licia who states she has another plan. Running after Shakma, Licia apologizes for trying to deceive him, but when Shakma prepares to leave once more, Licia states that they can pay the 2,000 and an apology sum. Suddenly taking off her expensive clothes, Licia reveals that her dress and jewelry is worth 500 gold, something that impresses Shakma as he agrees to mediate with Paradil on Ars's behalf. Shakma does ask if Korin is truly loyal to the emperor, learning from Renge who spills that Misian plans to gain independence after the war, but Shakma could care less, instead warning Ars that negotiations with Paradil may not go as planned. That night, Ars and the gang toast to a job well done, apologizing to Licia once again for having to go so far, but Licia reveals that she had already foresaw everything from the very beginning. With everyone confused to hear Licia had already foresaw everything, Licia asks Ars if he really thinks Shakma would take their first offer of 1,000 gold, revealing that Shakma had always planned on adding a bribe on top of any initial offers. Luckily, Renge had revealed their hand, allowing Shakma to take the bait, and hence Licia was able to pay off the bribe with her jewelry and expensive clothes. With everybody impressed by Licia's scheming, Renge states that everything is wrong, storming off, but Lumera offers to speak with him. Outside, Lumera asks what is on Renge's mind, hearing Renge utter that he doesn't trust people who lie, wondering if Ars and the others can even be trusted to live amongst them. Lumera reminds Renge that since he was born into power, he was never forced to lie in his life, revealing that since Ars and Licia are both masters of their own domain but wield less power compared to someone like Renge, there is no choice but to lie and deceive in order to protect what is most precious to them. As it begins to rain, Renge runs off once more, catching the attention of Ars who spots Lumera reminiscing on the times he spent playing with a young Renge, asking Ars to not hate how righteous Renge is. As 1 week passes, Ars and the gang are notified that representatives from Paradil have arrived to negotiate, people that won't be easily swayed like Shakma. As everyone sits down, the Paradil ministers immediately ask if Misian plans on seeking independence from the emperor, demanding to know since Paradil is very loyal to the Emperor. Speaking up, Renge utters that Vastmark is lying about their independence, surprising everyone. Glaring at R's party, the minister's attitude quickly changes, happy to hear that Misian would never betray the Emperor, immediately offering to alliance with each other. As the gang sit down for another quick celebration, it's revealed that on the night Renge had run off, he had actually appeared before Lycia's room soaked. Immediately apologizing for doubting Lycia's personality, Renge had asked Lycia to teach all that she knew, something Lycia was glad to help with. On the carriage ride heading home, Lycia had told Ars that she had instructed Renge to attend as many parties as he could, enabling Renge to protect his honest nature along with spreading the rumor that Vastmark spread his own rumor of Misian wanting independence. It was thanks to Renge's honest nature that the rumors convinced Paradil to ally with them. Renge takes the chance to apologize to everyone for his ignorant nature, but Lycia states that Renge's want to change is more impressive, garnering Renge and Ars to promise to work together more moving forward. Seeing how much Renge has grown, Lumera sheds a tear, cutting to several days later when the gang have returned to Semplar. Given a warm welcome by Korin praises Ars' work only to scold Renge for tagging along without permission. Upon hearing Renge's ambition for learning, Korin is proud to hear Renge is striving to become a more competent ruler for Misian, prompting Ars to scan Renge's stats as he heads to train. Surprised to see Renge's stats have already increased so much, Korin can't help but reward Ars and his party with 100 gold coins each, something Ars plans to use to help fix up the village along with raising his soldiers' pays. Moving on to more important matters, Korin states that their next course of action is to invade Alfarda district, appointing Lumera and Ars to invade before the enemy can fortify their defenses. That night, Charlotte spots Ars all by himself, asking if Ars is okay with going to war. Ars admits that he is quite terrified of dying, but Ars knows he could never face his father if he turned tail and ran now. Ars reassures Charlotte he is a changed man, impressing Charlotte as she promises to stay by Ars's side. Back at the mansion, Rosal is seen training his physical body, egged on by Murray who enjoys her drink, but Rosal demands Murray teach him some war tactics. When Murray refuses, REITZ appears, confiscating her booze since she is slacking, but when Ars is brought into the conversation, REITZ begins to have a mental breakdown. Fearing that Ars may run into trouble, Rosal is forced to hold REITZ back from running after Ars, but luckily Ars and the others finally return home. Sitting down for a meal, Ars catches everyone up on their plans to mobilize their armies in 2 days, asking that everyone enjoy the day off tomorrow before they set off. With Lycia and Ars enjoying some food whilst strolling through town, Lycia is concerned that they're wasting time, but Ars mentions how he may not get to see Lycia during their war, so he wants to make the most of it. Just then, the townsfolk surround the two, asking if the war is true. When Ars confirms their worries, the townsfolk immediately beg Ars and Lycia to be careful, handing the two plenty of items for their travels. That evening, the two are satisfied with their little date, but Ars asks for some time alone as he has one more place he needs to visit. Heading over to his father's grave, Ars places a bouquet of flowers on his grave, telling Raven about all the adventures he's been up to since they last spoke. With a moment passing by, Ars declares that he now has the face of a warrior, asking his father to watch him in action. At that moment, Ars notices REITZ, Charlotte and Rosal have also arrived to pay Raven some respect, all taking turns to speak with Raven. First Charlotte admits she had never seen the life she was living now, thanking Raven for taking her in. Next Rosal utters that he has prepared diligently with his studies, and finally REITZ declares that he will remain by Ars' side till the very end. The next day, everyone begins to make preparations to head out, prompting Lycia to hand Ars his sword, promising to protect his home whilst he is away. Having all gathered at Semplar Plaza, Comir's army number 250, Torbakista's army number 350, Canair's army number 4000 and Lamberg's army number 200. Taking the stage, Curran's presence makes the soldiers roar, only for Korin to thank the soldiers for answering his call. Korin reminds the men that the capital of Misian, REINCARNATES, is currently being ruled by his younger brother Vastmark. Korin plans on first taking Bertudo, and hence they must first head through Alfarda and Samcage, but since Paradil is assisting them, their army can turn their full attention to invading Bertudo. Korin takes the chance to thank Ars for making their battle a little easier, rallying his soldiers to seize victory with him, all whilst Ars watches in awe as the soldiers cheer their hearts out, only for everyone to begin heading out. Heading through a forest, Lumera voices how proud he is that Ars is finally entering his first battlefield, followed by Rosal who reassures Ars he has drafted up countless strategies against the enemies. Additionally, Charlotte reminds Ars that her magic will decimate the battlefield, along with REITZ revealing that he has been training his army well, making Ars smile as he's glad to hear everyone is fired up. With everyone arriving at Alfarda Castle, all forces prepare to invade, but before Ars can experience war for the first time, the castle raises a white flag, surrendering. Having sieged the castle, Corin tells Ars that the enemy had chosen to surrender after realizing they were outnumbered, telling Ars their next great challenge will be Bertudo. Cutting to the Samkach district, Thomas is revealed to have arrived, meeting up with the headman of the Samkach district, Fredor Vandal. Thomas voices how he'll ensure Vassmark doesn't lose any more land, heading over to retrieve a sword only to crumple it with his bare hands. Fredor bows his head as Thomas leaves, only to spot his daughter Selena scolding her father for submitting to Thomas' every word. Fredor states he has no choice, knowing that Thomas is skilled enough to give them a fighting chance, plus Fredor needs to defend Fort Vakmakro, but Selena offers to defend Fort Vakmakro herself. Back with Ars and the gang, they discuss the best way to conquer the district with minimum casualties, making Rosal offer a solution. Rosal reminds everyone that there are 3 fortresses surrounding Castle Samkach, therefore they should split their forces and invade the 3 surrounding forts at the same time. Once the 3 forts have been secured, Corin and his remaining men will storm the main castle. Corin knows that Fort Vakmakro is the most important of them all, assigning Ars and Lumera to take care of the fort. The next day, Ars and his party surmise that Fort Vakmakro is the only fortress that overlooks the main castle and the other 2 forts, prompting Ars to ask if Rosal or Murray has a plan. Rosal suggests that they first have a scout check on the army's formations, but Murray butts in, reminding Rosal that his naive thinking will get them killed. Murray advises Rosal to think in the enemy's shoes, reminding everyone that their forces easily outnumber the enemy, making Rosal realize the enemy will try for a pincer attack on Ars soldiers. Murray states they should send out scouts both high and low to ensure no sneak attacks are successful, something Rosal quickly jotted down, grateful for the advice. Following Selena, she is notified that the enemies are approaching their fort, swiftly casting a barrier that encases the entire fort, declaring that she refuses to lose. Back outside, the gang prepare barrels of mana for the mages to cast, all firing off their fireballs, but the barrier holds strong. Luckily, Charlotte lets loose her own fire spell, tearing apart the barrier, but before Lumera can send in his troops, the barrier begins regenerating. Murray's is impressed the enemy has a defensive specialist, asking if Charlotte will be able to break through, but Charlotte declares she'll give it her all to impress Ars. Following Selena, her army begins to panic seeing their enemy's powerful spells, but Selena smirks, reminding everyone they don't actually have to defeat the enemy. At that moment, Ars is notified that an army of 1,000 soldiers are creeping up from behind them, leading Lumera to suggest they send 2,000 soldiers of their own to defend whilst 2,000 remain attacking, but suddenly they are alerted that the enemy's main force of 10,000 soldiers are also closing in on them. Excited, Murray knows only one man is capable of such a bold tactic, but Ars is more concerned about their next course of action. Rosal states that moving to meet the enemy would ultimately lead their army to lose, but if they choose to focus on sieging the fort, Corin and the renaming forces may arrive and back them up. Seeing as the mages need half a day to whittle down the enemy's barrier, Lumera prepares to have their forces retreat, but Ars thinks otherwise. Completely believing in his party's abilities, Ars asks if REITZ can hold off an army of 10,000 with his 2,000-man army, reminding REITZ of a younger Ars who believed in him. With complete confidence, REITZ offers to hold off the army for a whole day and even slaughter a few if Ars wishes, but this fires Charlotte up, declaring she'll only need an hour to tear down the barrier. With Lumera confused, Ars explains that a retreat will guarantee the enemy time to bolster their defenses, an advantage they don't want the enemies to have. Seeing Ars's determination, Lumera agrees to support Ars fully, something Murray reveals the enemy would have never accounted for. Cutting to some enemy soldiers, they begin gossiping about how their 10,000 army should be terrifying to the enemies, suddenly realizing they've been surrounded by archers only to spot REITZ riding in. Flashing back to an hour ago, REITZ had asked Comier to have his men funnel the enemy, allowing REITZ to charge through them. Back with Charlotte, we see her getting more frustrated, seeing as the enemy's barrier continues to regenerate. Rosal knows that the stalemate will end once one side runs out of mana, but seeing as they are running out of the magic liquid, Rosal mentions how they must somehow break the magic equipment along with the enemy's mana source if they want to break through. Following Selena, her army is amazed to see such a vast storage of mana, something Selena had asked her father to prepare ahead of time. Refusing to lose the fort, Selena chooses to strengthen her barrier further, ultimately discouraging Charlotte. As REITZ rides with his men into the enemy, he's forced to leap off his horse in order to engage the enemy, holding on until Ars can break through. Having come to their final barrel of mana, Charlotte reasons she should make use of her ultimate spell, a spell that burns up mana very quickly and may even hurt the caster. Wanting to make Ars proud, Charlotte asks for Ars to look after her body if she happens to faint. With REITZ choosing to shred through the enemy soldiers, Charlotte prepares her ultimate spell, conjuring hundreds of fireballs that are raining down on Selina's barrier. Horrified, Selina struggles to hold on, accidentally spilling all magic liquid along with shattering her magic staff, having been unable to keep up with Charlotte's power. Having destroyed the barrier, Charlotte asks if Ars is proud of her, suddenly collapsing into Ars' arm. As REITZ also appears victorious, Lumera declares that they've won from all angles, something Murray fears since Ars's retainers are quite the formidable foes. As Thomas and Fredor learn of Fort Vakmakro falling, Corin praises Lumera and Ars for capturing their designated fort, noting that Selina is their captain. When Ars wonders what Corin plans to do with all the captured, Ars is shocked to hear Corin plans on executing them all, fearing they'll eat up supplies and possibly betray them. With Selina accepting her own demise, Ars notices all of her men have also prepared to give their life, something Ars refuses to accept. Before Corin can give the command to execute everyone, Ars butts in, reminding Corin that their goal is to unite Messian. Ars believes that executing their enemies will guarantee their future resentment and they'll never be able to unite fully as a country. With everyone amazed by Ars' speech, Rosal suggests that Ars appraise the captured Sok troops, hoping to recruit more followers only to exchange the remainder for their own captured troops. With Corin happy to follow such a plan, Ars kneels in front of Selina, scolding Selina for accepting death so easily, especially since it's her duty as the leader to ensure her army is safe. Hearing that Ars still hopes to become allies in the future, Selina is truly grateful to Ars for sparing her troops, but clutching onto her pendant, Selina still refuses to live out a life of shame knowing she has failed. Just then Charlotte appears, praising Selina for her amazing defensive barrier, admitting that as an offensive mage Charlotte can only attack but Selina specializes in defense magic, a skill fit for a lord. Appearing before Selina, Corin orders Selina to ask her father to reconsider siding with, warning Selina that they'll continue to invade if they refuse. That night, Ars finishes up appraising and recruiting new soldiers, entering his room only to spot Fam has arrived. Fam begins telling the gang that Castle Samkach is pretty confident in their defense, relying on their impenetrable gate along with Thomas's genius to survive. As Ars rushes to report the intel to Corin, Rosal realizes that the outcome of their siege has already been decided. At the same time, Selina returns with a fraction of her army, apologizing to her father for failing, but her father couldn't be more happy to see his daughter alive, something Selina refuses to accept having embarrassed her family's name. The next morning, Corin concludes that the enemy refuses to give up, preparing his men to storm the building. At the same time, the enemy laughs at Corin's men, relieved to know the only way into the castle is through a narrow bridge. As Samka's men fire off powerful cannons at Corin's soldiers, they grow anxious seeing the enemy rushing their gates without hesitation, all whilst Fredor learns their impenetrable castle gate has been opened. Having snuck his way into the castle, Fam reveals he had assisted with the invasion for the insight, instructed by Rosal the night before to blend in with Samka's knights. With Selina also learning of the castle gate's opening, Selina prepares to fight once more, but is horrified to hear her father has completely surrendered. Flashing back, a young Selina rushes to greet her father who had returned from a successful campaign, captivated by her father's adventures. Having been given a pendant that symbolizes courage, Selina grew to despise her father, feeling sorry for her father who gave in to the demands of Vasmark. Rushing to her father's side, Selina grows more pissed hearing her father suggest she flee, instead declaring she'll fight till the death. At that moment, Thomas and his men appear, praising Selina's efforts, revealing he has a backup plan. Unveiling a catalyzer, Thomas declares that he has placed explosive traps all throughout the castle, asking for Fredor to lure Corin and his men inside only to blow up the castle with the catalyzer. When Fredor prepares to evacuate his men, Thomas corrects Fredor, ordering Fredor to give his life and blow up with the enemy. Thomas reminds Fredor that Vasmark doesn't take kindly to failure, convincing Fredor to accept his fate, but Selina suddenly remembers Ars telling her a lord should also consider their followers' lives. Before Selina can stop her father from accepting the catalyzer, Fredor destroys the item, glaring at Thomas as he refuses to give up the lives of his people for a selfish man like Vasmark. With no other words, Thomas swears he'll make Fredor regret his actions, heading off. Out of nowhere, one of Thomas's men prepares to cut down Fredor, forcing Selena to step in front of her father. In the blink of an eye, Fedor dashes forward, terrifying Thomas's lackeys, reassuring Selena that he's still able to fend for himself. That night, Fedor officially surrenders his land to Corin, offering his own head if it means his people can live on. Relieved to hear such an honorable thing, Corin asks Fedor to join his army, something Fedor graciously accepts. Off to the side, Selena promises she'll grow to be a more competent lord in the future. Outside the castle, Thomas and his men lurk behind some bushes, saddened to have to resort to using a second catalyzer. As Thomas activates a catalyzer, a massive explosion is seen elsewhere, cutting to Pham, who reveals he had relocated all the explosives in the castle elsewhere. Hearing this, everyone is surprised to hear Ars's party knew of the explosions, learning that Rosal had deduced Thomas would use an underhand tactic to ensure they come up on top. Seeing as Sok's army was clearly smaller than Curran's, Rosal deduced Thomas would blow up the castle once Curran's army had taken control of it. As Ars promises to pay Pham for saving everyone's lives, Ars demands to know why Rosal didn't tell him sooner, but Murray butts in, revealing that Rosal didn't want to distract Ars with more information. Murray praises Rosal for putting himself in the enemy's shoes. Amazed, Rosal was able to pinpoint the enemy's intentions so accurately. Seeing Ars' party so happy, Selena can't help but admire them, hearing her father apologize for disappointing her. Selena admits she simply didn't want her father to bow to anyone, admitting she was wrong for wanting to throw away her life, as a lord should swallow their pride if it's what's right for their land. Within a few days, word of Corin conquering Sok spread like wildfire, along with their special leader Ars. Back at the Luvent mansion, Ars' maid rushes to tell Licia the good news, but Licia holds back her excitement, stating they must act more tamed. As the maid leaves, Licia jumps for joy, only to be embarrassingly caught by the maid celebrating Ars's victory. In Castle Samcage, Corin states their next destination is VIDZ, but seeing everyone exhausted, Corin permits everyone to have a 3-day break. Excited, Ars states he wants to tour the city of Samcage, happy to hear that Murray and Charlotte wants to feast on the city's food and drinks whilst Rosal wants to continue studying. With REITZ asking if he can accompany Ars around town, we cut to Charlotte and Murray indulging on as much food and booze as they can, Rosal reading as many books as he can. Touring the city together, REITZ points out how they used to go on adventures all the time when Ars was younger. Off in the distance, Ars spots a crowd surrounding a lone man, surprised to see the man had invented a miniature device that can float through the air. Sadly, the man's invention comes crashing down, but having not given up, the man unveils a strange-looking egg that houses what looks like a mechanical bird. When REITZ points out how boring the invention is, Ars can't help but offer to purchase the invention for 3 gold, amazed that such a toy exists compared to the basic building blocks he's used to. Wondering how talented the inventor is, Ars attempts to scan the man, but his appraisal suddenly malfunctions. Upon testing his eye on REITZ, Ars' eye works fine, freaking Ars out for a bit, but he brushes it off as nothing. With 3 days already passing, Corin and the others gather at Castle Samcage, reminding everyone that their next city to conquer will be VIDZ, one of the 3 largest cities alongside Semplar and Arcontes. Since Vassmark is already ruling over VIDZ, Corin knows that taking such a powerful country from Vassmark would give them a massive advantage, but Lumiere points out how winter is coming. Knowing that the harsh weathers will impede on their armies, Corin plans on splitting up their army to invade before winter comes, hoping to take down Castle Stotz, the largest defending castle of VIDZ, alongside Castle Rolto. Once both castles are secured, Corin knows they'll be able to secure VIDZ for themselves, turning to Ars and Lumera as Corin assigns them to take over Castle Rolto. Beginning to brainstorm, Rosal first suggests they conquer the surrounding castles before attacking Castle Rolto, but Ars is stressed seeing as they are unable to make contact with any of the surrounding castles. Ars wonders if they'll even be able to invade so many additional fortresses at once, but Lumera states they must since Castle Rolto is one of Vassmark's major strongholds. Just then, Ars receives a message from Fort Vardosen, offering to chat only if an important person were to negotiate with them. Lumera knows the renowned commander Lupa is in charge of Castle Vardosen, someone even Corin failed to convince to join them. Ars wonders if Lumera can handle their negotiations, but Lumera states Ars is the only one that can convince the mighty general. With the big day arriving, Ars sets off towards Castle Vardosen, but is stopped at the gate as the castle knights demand to know who Ars is. The moment Ars introduces himself, the castle knights draw their weapons, triggering REITZ's battle senses as he steps in front preparing for battle. Attempting to calm everyone down, Ars realizes the enemy is too agitated to listen to him, but when Ars suggests they retreat for now, Murray states this is actually the perfect time to negotiate. Murray reminds Ars that Lumera would mercilessly tear down the castle if the enemy attacked Ars now, plus Murray finds it suspicious that Castle Vardosen is the closest castle to them, but they were the last to respond. Murray scolds the enemies for such a pathetic attempt at scaring them, asking Ars what his decision is, impressed to see Ars dropping his weapons even when he's so terrified. Calling out to Lupa, Ars wishes to negotiate without any bloodshed, finally getting Lupa to open the gates. With only Reitz and Murray allowed to accompany Ars, the three are escorted through the castle, but Ars suddenly begins feeling a stinging pain from his eye. Finally greeting Lupa Lustin, Lupa says they'll chat in their conference room, but Reitz can't help but notice the surrounding guards are glaring at them. Before Ars can take another step, he trips on the stairs, accidentally revealing the egg toy he purchased, all watching as the mechanical bird appears from the egg, flying and spinning around only to land onto Lupa's palm. Lupa is amazed to hear such an invention is considered a toy, returning the item as he continues to his conference room, but Ars takes the chance to scan Lupa's stats. Finally able to use his eye without feeling any pain, Ars is amazed to see his eye reveal that Lupa is the eldest born in the Lustin household along with Lupa's exact birth date, married status and personality. Ars is shocked to learn such a terrifying man is married, but is escorted into a room to wait. Seeing as Ars is unable to identify a weakness in Lupa's stats, the gang decide to rest for a bit, but Ars can't help but notice the items stuffed behind the room's sofa, declaring that their negotiations will run smoothly. Finally sitting down to negotiate, Lupa reminds Ars he is not to be taken lightly, but Ars first asks how Lupa's wife is doing, believing Lupa to receive a baby soon. Terrified to hear Ars knows such a thing, Ars cries that such an honorable man like Lupa wouldn't lure and attack the enemy with such underhand tactics, deducing that Lupa's pregnant wife is being held in Castle Rolto. With Lupa not denying such a thing, Murray adds that Castle Rolto must be holding Lupa's wife hostage, forcing Lupa to defend and give his life to defend Castle Vardosen, but Ars points out that his scouts haven't spotted any reinforcements from Rolto arriving to help Lupa. Ars declares that the general of Castle Rolto has completely given up on Lupa, but Lupa believes he can still save his wife's life if he manages to take out at least one powerful enemy, hence why Lupa had asked for Ars to come alone. When Reitz asks why Lupa didn't just kill them the moment they were alone, Ars reveals that Lupa is a good man, taking out the egg invention. Ars feels sympathy for Lupa, knowing that if Lupa betrays his superior, his wife will die, but if Lupa gives his life to fight, he'll save his wife but will never get to see his child. Completely defeated, Lupa states he has fought countless battles, and that he knew from the very beginning that he had been abandoned. Lupa knows the right thing to do is fight, but Lupa's final wish is to at least see his child once before he passes, bringing tears to Lupa's men. Seeing such a valiant man breaking down, Ars declares he'll personally infiltrate Castle Rolto and rescue Lupa's wife, asking if Lupa would give them this chance. Without a moment's hesitation, Lupa begs Ars to do so. At the same time, we cut over to Castle Rolto where Jean Tendry, the lord of the castle, reminds her General Dan Allrest that everything is going according to plan. Returning to Lumera, Ars tells everyone about Lupa's dilemma, reporting that they intend to rescue Lupa's wife and help Lupa see his child. With the gang realizing that Ars hasn't even thought about how they can rescue Lupa's wife, a strange-looking man suddenly bursts into the room asking to speak with Lumera, having made it past all of Lumera's guards. Ars takes the chance to scan the man's stats, horrified to see the man to be the 31-year-old Clement Matra III, a man that houses abnormal stats. Sitting down for a chat, Reitz realizes that Clement is the head of the Matra Company, a combat-oriented group of mercenaries and people that have never failed a mission. Clement asks Lumera who Ars is, surprised a mere child is considered an equal by Lumera, but Reitz gets pissed, demanding Clement not think of Ars so lightly. Turning to Reitz, Clement praises Reitz for being such a powerful leader, but Clement points out how Reitz's army is still too naive, warning Reitz to be prepared for the day when their army will suffer complete defeat. Clement states having Rosal as a genius strategist must be the best life, as for mercenaries like himself, he has no choice but to fight till the death, having seen countless allies pass. With Lumiere asking Clement to not be so harsh on Ars and his army, they start the mission, mentioning that most of the commanders of each castle have had their wives held as hostages in Castle Rolto, but their exact location in the castle is unknown. Seeing as the castle houses around 10,000 soldiers, Miriel knows that sending in Pham and his disguised soldiers won't help with rescuing the wives, therefore their best plan is to lure the enemy outside the castle. With the numbers in both armies equal, Reitz knows that the enemy will prefer to remain in the castle having resource advantage, Additionally, since winter is coming, conquering VIDZ is seeming more unlikely. With Murray summarizing what they must do, Murray calls upon Rosal to suggest a plan, having been drafting up a plan of attack all this time. That night in Castle Rolto, Lord Jean hears that Fort Vardosin had apparently refused to surrender, and hence Ars and Lumaire's army have surrounded Lupa's castle. Jean is pleased with their current position, knowing they simply have to wait until winter and they would have won, but General Dan gets annoyed, having to wait out the war. Just then another messenger arrives, handing Jean a bloodied letter from Lupa, who informs Jean that their enemies total 10,000, but seeing as Vardosin is refusing to surrender, the enemy has sent half of their army along with a powerful mage to attack Roldo Castle. Shocked, Jean learns that Lupa had sent the envelope out of desperation, something Jean confirms as a mage has appraised the handwriting to belong to Lupa. Fearing that the mage that broke through Fort Vacmacro's barrier will do the same to theirs, Jean smirks, stating that the enemy with 5,000 will easily be overrun by their army of 10,000. As Dan heads off to prepare his army, we cut to Lupa, who reveals he had delivered the bloodied envelope just as Ars had instructed. Additionally, Lupa has informed the other generals from the other castles to not interfere, seeing as their wives have been captured as well. But before Lupa can prepare to fight alongside Ars, Ars states that Lupa must remain hidden as his presence will show the enemy that he's betrayed them. Ars states that if they lose, Lupa should remain fighting alongside Vasmark, but if Ars manages to win, Lupa must join their side. As a final goodbye, Ars hands Lupa his toy egg, promising to return with Lupa's wife. Meeting up with the others, Rosal divulges their plan. Rosal states that they'll have their army of 5,000 lure the enemy off the battlefield and towards a forest, drawing them away from the castle where both sides will have their 10,000 armies clash. But while this happens, Fam and his shadows will sneak into the castle and rescue the wives. Seeing as the enemy may not be lured out so easily, Miriel states that Ars and Lumaira must be the ones to help lure out the enemies, cutting to the next day where Ars and Lumaira are finally face to face with Dan and his army. With a triumphant speech, Ars orders his men to charge, having both sides clash, but Dan instantly gets the upper hand, sending out his cavalry units. When Charlotte attempts to fire a magic spell at Dan, Dan tanks the attack, charging at Charlotte, but luckily several soldiers protect Charlotte. Scanning Dan's stats, Ars realizes Dan is just as powerful as REITZ, but Dan's horse riding units are also equally as powerful, making their matchup unfavorable. As Ars soldiers take a defensive stance against the enemy's cavalry unit, we cut to the wives who are being held in Castle Rolto, all learning that the enemy have finally waged war. Before the wives can be moved to another room, Fam appears knocking how the guard that is trapping the ladies, only to demand the wives stay calm and follow his orders. Back on the battlefield, both Ars and Lumaira orders everyone to retreat, egging Dan to chase after them. Before Dan can pursue them, Jean orders everyone to wait, spotting Ars' men looking determined, deducing that the enemy plans to revolt near the forest. With Jean taking charge, he orders Dan to surround the enemy and not chase after them, but Dan's soldiers wonder if Dan should be taking orders from such a weakling like Jean. Dan reveals that himself and Jean were born into a horse-riding village, where they would pillage and slaughter women and children alike, making a name for themselves. One night, Dan had spotted Jean beheading the men they captured, and when there was a bounty placed on Jean's father, Jean personally slaughtered his own father, serving his head to the governor of Missian in order to achieve noble status. Back in the present, Ars and Lumaira both check to see if the enemy is pursuing them, but right on cue, Dan leaps from surrounding, dividing Ars's army into two. Before REITZ can reorganize their formation, Jean appears beside him, cutting down REITZ's men one by one. Knowing that Ars will need help, Charlotte orders REITZ to go on ahead, leaving Charlotte to ride alongside Jean. At the same time, Ars spots all of his men falling to arrows, even giving their lives to ensure Ars makes it to the forest. Watching everything transpire, Clement orders his men to be ready. At the same time, Murray reports that a third of their army has been wiped, prompting Lumaira to ask Ars to summon Clement and his men. Thinking deeply, Ars spots how determined his soldiers are, choosing to hold out a little longer, as summoning Clement and his troops in open field will be sentencing them all to death against the enemy's cavalry. Against Lumaira's better judgment, Ars cries for his men to continue strong, but when he turns to check on the enemy, Ars realizes they've all mysteriously vanished. Up from above, Ars suddenly spots Dan leaping towards him, but luckily REITZ appears blocking the blow. Apologizing for being late, REITZ chooses to mark Dan, holding him off as Ars spots the forest up ahead. Sadly, another army of reinforcements have cut off their escape, but Ars suddenly realizes that Lupa has arrived to assist them. Seeing as they are outnumbered, Dan orders his men to retreat, But before he leaves, Dan fires off a stray arrow that pierces Lupa from behind. As Ars checks up on Lupa, Ars cries that Lupa has informed the enemy of his betrayal, but Lupa reminds Ars as being selfish. Lupa states that since Ars is willing to give his life to save his wife, Lupa will pledge his life as a knight and serve Ars, both agreeing to give it their all to ensure the mission is a success. As Dan rides back to the castle, he alerts the castle to slay the wives, cutting to Pham, who has begun to help the wives escape. Before Lupa's wife escapes, the castle suddenly orders for a lockdown, having received orders that spies may have infiltrated their castle and that Lupa has betrayed them, hence the wives must be executed at once. As Lupa escorts Ars and his men towards the forest, Lupa checks on his bloodied wound, but as we follow Pham, we see he and Lupa's wife have chosen to hide inside a closet. Seeing as Lupa's wife is about to go into labor, Pham prepares to fight for his life, but suddenly the enemy guards are called elsewhere, giving Pham the chance to praise Lupa's wife for enduring all the pain. Back with Ars, we see that he's finally made it to the forest, wondering if the enemy will continue to chase them, but Rosal states that Mireille and himself will force the enemies to chase after them. Outside the forest, Jean informs his army that the enemy most certainly has a trap laid out in the forest, but before Jean can order a retreat, a few of his men suddenly rush into the forest. Seeing their fellow soldiers thirsting for victory, a fraction of Jean's men rush towards the forest, but Jean simply orders the remaining to retreat. Sadly, Dan falls victim as well, stating that he'll defeat REITZ at all cost, forcing Jean to race after Dan. It's revealed that Mireille and some of Ars's troops have stolen the enemy's uniform, and had rushed towards the forest to bait Jean and his army to claim victory, especially since they've already slayed a third of the 5,000 men Ars has had with him. Having met up with Hammond and Clement, Ars states that they'll hold their defensive line here, but Clement asks for Ars to rest easy, praising Ars for being so brave and not faltering at the slightest adversity. With Clement promising to take it from here, we cut over to the enemy soldiers who have made their way into the forest, rushing towards Clement's men, only to be strung up by several traps. Appearing from the bushes, the Maitre company make themselves known, slaughtering and cornering all the enemy cavalry, reminding everyone why Clement is known as the Demon of Maitre. With Ars confirming that Charlotte and Mireille are fine, Dan is seen charging past Clement's men, dead set on taking Ars' head. Pissed off, REITZ intercepts, cutting down Dan's horse, only to challenge Dan to a duel. As REITZ's sword clashes with Dan's heavy axe, Ars realizes both men's power stats are exactly equal at 89, but Dan seems to be forcing REITZ back with his long-ranged axe. Spotting an opening, Dan slashes towards REITZ's torso, but accidentally gets his axe stuck in a nearby tree. Having planned it from the very beginning, REITZ lands a finishing blow, making Ars realize that REITZ was looking at the bigger picture of their duel the entire time, having doubled Dan's ingenuity and outsmarted Dan. Tying up Dan, REITZ holds off on slaying Dan, instead praising Dan for being a formidable opponent, but just then Jean and his army arrive. Realizing Jean to house a prowess stat of 92, greater than REITZ. Ars watches as Clement steps up, watching as Jean ferociously raises his blade seeing Dan has been captured. In an instant, Clement parries and blows Jean back, horrifying everyone as Clement's prowess stat is above 100. With Jean captured as well, the enemies all choose to surrender, giving Ars the chance to commend his army, having achieved victory even after losing so many men. Seeing a mere child celebrating their victory, Dan breaks free, preparing to take his own life for his failures, but Jean intervenes ordering Dan to not be stupid. Jean admits he could have simply let Dan ride into the forest alone, but having remembered a fond memory of Dan serving him a hearty soup, Jean had no choice but to ride after Dan, grateful that Dan is alive. With both men promising to return home once everything is over, Lupa is surprised to see Ars taking the enemy as prisoners instead of slaying them. Ars states he plans to send them to Semplar. Seeing as everything is over, Ars states Lupa will finally get to see his wife, but out of nowhere Lupa suddenly collapses, having lost too much blood. Calling for a doctor, Ars hears that Lupa will pass away if he falls asleep now, demanding to know why Lupa was hiding his injuries from them. Lupa takes the chance to tell Ars about this dream, a day where peace returns to the land and Lupa and his wife can spend the rest of their days raising their child. Seeing Lupa struggling to stay conscious, Ars cries that he'll make sure this peaceful dream of his comes true, crying for Lupa to not fall asleep. Seeing his life flash before his eyes, Lupa begins remembering all the battles he's been in, suddenly reminiscing on all the fond memories he's spent with his wife Maria. With one final last breath, Lupa spots Maria in his vision, reaching out only to realize Maria is by his side. Instantly waking up, Pham reveals that he had assisted Maria with giving birth, handing Lupa his child, all watching as Lupa's dream has finally come true. That evening, Ars and his soldiers finish up burying all the corpses from the battlefield, giving Ars the chance to remind everyone that their battle was well fought, but to ensure such terrible bloodshed doesn't continue, they must prioritize making a better future for everyone involved. Placing a flower by the burial site of the dead, Ars' men cry out triumphantly, all whilst Ars' party realizes Ars' silhouette is slowly resembling a general. That night, REITZ visits Ars, spotting Ars writing multiple letters, shocked to learn Ars is personally writing letters to the families of the soldiers that have passed. Ars begins telling REITZ about the men and how Ars knows them, but suddenly Ars begins breaking down crying, apologizing as he didn't want REITZ to see him so weak. Knowing that Ars is carrying too much burden himself, REITZ offers to write the letters with Ars, all whilst Charlotte listens in, stopping Rosal from interfering and giving the boys some time to themselves. Seeing as the surrounding generals had also surrendered, Castle Rolto eventually falls to Ars and Lumera, both pleased to hear the injured are recovering well or have been sent home entirely. Knowing they still have to wait for Corin to deal with Castle Stotz, Ars suddenly hears Fam demanding to be paid his full amount, notifying Ars he was 1 silver short. Apologizing for the mishap, Ars asks Fam to report their victory to Corin along with bringing back news on Corin's current affairs. Riding off in the night, Fam and his men head towards Corin's supply camp, all whilst Fam's men wonder if Fam has been too harsh on Ars, but Fam reminds them they need to be paid well seeing as Ars will be rich one day. In the distance, Fam spots Corin's supply camp on fire, rushing to the scene as soldiers attempt to rescue the resources. Fam learns that most of Corin's supply camps had been set on fire by the enemy, resulting in half of their resources and aqua magia being lost, something Fam knows he must quickly report to Ars about. Elsewhere in Castle Stotz, Kansas Vandal the headman of VIDZ thanks Thomas for his genius tactics, having managed to outsmart Corin himself, but Kansas wonders why Thomas targeted the enemy's magic supply. Thomas says that Kansas is still naive since magic is the most dangerous thing in warfare, reminding Kansas that their end goal is to draw on the war until winter, where they will claim victory. Thomas does mention how they can't rest easy just yet, but reveals that Corin's greatest flaw is Corin himself. Kansas wonders how a powerful man like Corin could have a weakness, learning that Corin is an honorable man who fights alongside his allies on the battlefield instead of sitting back in Semplar and others do battle. Thomas says they'll definitely have a chance to attack Corin directly, asking Kansas to leave everything to him, since he needs to redeem himself. Back in Castle Rolto, the gang are notified of Corin's supply camps being attacked, something Rosal deduces is to draw on the war, something Murray knows is the working of Thomas. Before Ars can order everyone to move out, Murray asks for any more information, hearing that enemy mages have been sighted with large catalyzers near Mount Thori, a mountain next to where Corin's army are camping. Rosal wonders if the enemy are attempting to blast Corin with magic now that Corin's army are low on aqua magia, but Lumera says the mountain is still too far away from Corin's campsite. Assessing the situation, Murray declares that the enemy's true target is Corin himself, asking if Fam is still near the supply core. Having a messenger relay a countermeasure, Fam is asked to head straight to where Corin is stationed, but before Fam can ask questions it begins to rain. Murray explains that Thomas plans on taking advantage of the rain along with having their mages cast rain spells onto Corin's army, but Ars wonders how that would benefit the enemy. Murray adds that rain will turn the ground to mud, making travel very difficult along with the perfect environment for the enemy to sneak attack since the rain covers any sound. As Fam fears the worst, he and his men quickly ride to Corin's location, but at the same time Corin shields himself from the rain. Spotting troops riding into camp, Corin suddenly realizes he's under attack, having used the rain to sneak past the defenses. Realizing the enemy is after his head, Corin steps up and orders his men to fight, drawing his blade only to clash swords with Thomas himself. Glad to be seeing Thomas again, Corin accidentally slips on some mud, giving Thomas an advantage, but Corin manages to evade a lethal blow instead impaling Thomas's leg with a dagger. Unable to best Corin alone, Thomas cries for his men to surround Corin, but seeing no way out, Corin prepares to fight. Out of nowhere, the surrounding area is enshrouded in darkness, only for Fam to appear reporting Ars as having sent him to rescue Corin. Hopping onto Fam's horse, Corin is shocked to see Fam wields shadow magic, magic only the most skilled casters can use as they blind both the enemy and caster. Shocked as a skilled caster is working for Ars, Fam suddenly hands Corin over to his men, stating that he must stay back to slow down their pursuers. Following Thomas, he desperately rides after Fam, only to be enshrouded in darkness once again, but Thomas orders his men to simply focus and detect Fam's presence. Out of nowhere, Fam slays 2 of Thomas's men, impressing Thomas as Pham is able to conceal his presence as well, but Thomas mentions how Pham's sneak attacks won't work on him, blocking a slash and forcing Pham to retreat. Getting off his horse, Thomas readies his blade, defending and landing a slash on Pham. Seeing as Pham has bought enough time for Corin to escape, Thomas orders his men to retreat, allowing Pham to escape as well. The next day, Corin immediately rallies his soldiers, preparing to take down Castle Stotz at once, impressing Pham as Corin and his soldiers are as resilient as ever. Heading to speak with Shadow, Corin rewards Shadow with plenty of gold, offering to add Pham to his future retainers as well. Sadly, Pham refuses both the gold and the position, stating that he works for Ars only, heading off as he only accepts money from his employer. Grateful, Corin sends a messenger to tell Ars about Pham's great work along with money to help pay Pham. As Pham and his men ride through the forest, Pham wonders if he should have taken the deal, flashing back to a gloomy day where Pham is in the middle of assassinating his target. Having returned to his employer to claim his reward, Pham reassures his employer that their secret is kept with him, flashing back to the present where Pham has returned to Ars's camp. Ars is glad Corin's rescue was a success, shocked to see Pham had been hurt, rushing to see if Pham's wound had been properly treated. Pham reminds Ars that his shadow mercenaries are criminals and murderers, asking if Ars is afraid of them, but Ars is confused, stating that Pham has been nothing but nice to them, therefore Ars trusts Pham completely. Breaking out into laughter, Pham is glad to be treated so kindly, asking to be hired as one of Ars' retainers as a reward. Shocked, Ars wonders why Pham wants the position now, but Pham says Ars will one day be the ruler of Summerforth, so he would like to bet everything he has on Ars, especially since Ars still treats Pham and his men like humans. With Pham and his men pledging their allegiance to Ars, we cut over to Castle Stotz where various guards drink, knowing they'll be safe after damaging the enemy's resources and magic supply. As the men celebrate winter coming, they spot a lone redhead boy uttering that life is boring with fighting, annoying one of the men as they rush to confiscate the redhead's weapon. Surprisingly, the redhead's weapon is too heavy for the soldiers to pick up, watching as the boy retrieves his weapon, all whilst stating weaklings have no right to touch his weapon. With the current state of affairs, Ars is almost done conquering Arfeda, but their next obstacle is Castle Stotz. Beginning their attack on Castle Stotz, Ars asks Corin to be notified as their plan is to have Corin's forces invade with 50,000 on the south gate whilst Ars and Lumera take their 5,000 men north. They plan on having the headman of VIDZ to focus their mages on Corin and underestimate Ars's army, but that is where Charlotte comes in. Spotting Charlotte riding with REITZ, the enemy fires arrows enchanted with magic at our duo, but Charlotte manages to barely block them as defensive magic isn't her strong suit. Seeing as it's only two people, the enemy fires a ball of magic at the two, but Charlotte retaliates with a fireball of her own, shredding the enemy's magic only to blow a hole in the castle wall. Having made it close enough, Charlotte follows up by tearing a hole in the castle gates, terrifying the enemies as they spot Ars and Lumera rushing their broken gate. Ars orders Clement and his men to prioritize opening the south gate for Corin from the inside, all whilst Ars thanks REITZ and Charlotte for the great work. Ars asks for REITZ and Murray to lead their army, but at the same time the redhead boy gets excited, seeing as things are finally starting to ramp up. Storming the castle, Murray and REITZ take charge, all clashing against enemy soldiers, shocking everyone as REITZ is a one-man army. With no other choice, the enemy surrenders, asking to be spared, but suddenly the redhead boy leaps onto the battlefield. The boy introduces himself as Bram Joe, born and raised in VIDZ, but it takes a while for Joe to remember that he is 17 years old. When one of the soldiers orders Joe to stand down, Joe nonchalantly knocks the soldier out, only to order REITZ and the others to fight him. In an instant, Joe blows back several knights with a single swing of his axe, finally giving REITZ a reason to duel Joe. As Joe rushes REITZ, the enemy knights resume battle, but REITZ easily outmaneuvers Joe, slipping a slash only to raise his blade to Joe's neck. Seeing as REITZ is quite talented, Joe gets excited finally meeting a strong opponent, but REITZ steps back declaring that Joe is the most boring person he's ever fought. Shocked, Joe reveals he is the strongest person in the castle, but REITZ easily trips Joe only to point out Joe is only strong and gets overly emotional when fighting. Going for a slash, REITZ fakes the attack, only to land a sneak attack on Joe's back. Annoyed that a strong boy like Joe is so dumb, REITZ continues to lecture Joe, all whilst Murray finishes off the remaining enemy knights. Ars reports that they've secured the castle, suddenly turning to see REITZ sparring with Joe, but gets shocked seeing REITZ teaching Joe how to fight. Scanning Joe's stats, Ars is horrified to see something, but at the moment REITZ finally forces Joe onto the ground, stating that a soldier that puts in the bare minimum every day should quit and try something else. Realizing that Ars is present, REITZ apologizes for getting too emotional, but Joe takes the chance to offer himself up to be REITZ's student. Joe says he can start off by doing mundane tasks, but before REITZ can reject Joe, Ars cries they'll be happy to have Joe on board. Ars reveals that although Joe's ingenuity is low, his prowess and leadership stats have the potential to surpass even REITZ one day, hoping REITZ will nurture such talent. Realizing that Ars is REITZ's master, Joe pledges to serve Ars as well, something that ultimately convinces REITZ to treat Joe like one of their own. With Joe declaring that he's finally found the person his big bro had asked him to look for, Murray gets excited seeing they have another recruit, but the enemy forces grow horrified seeing as Murray also has the title Mistress of Torture. As the enemies divulge any remaining traps in the castle, Clement heads deep to disable any traps, allowing Fam to help open the south gate where Curran's army have been waiting. Flooding the castle, Curran's army scares Lord Kansas away, officially handing over the castle to Curran's army. With snow starting to fall, Vassmark is once again notified of Curran's actions, but cutting back to Castle Stotts, Corran thanks Ars and his retainers for conquering Castle Rolto and Stotts along with saving his life. As everyone cheers for Ars, Fam suddenly spots two suspicious men glaring at Ars. Heading to a separate room, Corran along with several men await Ars' arrival, all glaring at Ars. Corran asks Ars to not mind his men, stating that a young man like Ars would naturally garner suspicion, prompting Corran to demand to know who Ars is and what he is hiding. Seeing Curran's men raise their weapon, Ars wonders if Corran considers his talents a threat, or if his reincarnation has been figured out. Ars chooses to declare that he is simply living life as a lord, but Corran asks why Ars would do so much to help them, demanding Ars not lie to him. Ars states that he only wants to create a peaceful world for the people of his domain, especially since his father has expected great things before he passed. Laughing out loud, Corran is satisfied by Ars' answer, revealing that his retainers had been suspicious of Ars' intentions, believing Ars would be after Curran's throne once everything was done. Corran reminds Ars that he is a big deal now and that not everyone will like him, but Corran himself says he has high hopes for Ars. Leaving the room, Ars shakes, wondering how things would have turned out if he answered differently, but is suddenly struck by a snowball. Seeing Charlotte to be the culprit, Ars hears that Charlotte wants to play in the snow for a bit, but REITZ reprimands Charlotte for slacking off. When Charlotte smacks REITZ with some snow as well, REITZ and Joe suddenly spring into action starting a snowball fight with Charlotte. Surprised to see everyone fired up, Ars spots Fam hosting bets to see who would win, but when Ars checks on Clement, he notices Clement is having a drink-off against Murray. At the same time, Rosal unveils his massive snowman, but having been too busy chasing after Charlotte, REITZ accidentally destroys Rosal's creation. Seeing Rosal crying, REITZ calls for a truce, ordering everyone to create an even bigger snowman. Since the snowball fight has no victor, Fam swiftly leaves with everyone's betting money. Charlotte wonders if there'll be snow forever, wishing to spend next winter with everyone, something that Ars wishes as well, hoping to treasure this moment forever. Elsewhere in a forest, Thomas scolds himself for being defeated by Murray, suddenly spotting Vassmark has come to visit him. Flashing back, we see a young Murray and Thomas playing chess, both wowing their parents, but sadly Murray was always a few steps ahead of Thomas. Even at Misson's Officers Academy, Murray would outpace all her competitors, praised for her talent all whilst Thomas was left envious of her. With several years passing, Murray would garner praise for the governor himself, something that ultimately convinced Thomas that his sister was a genius, but luckily Thomas knew Murray despised their father, something Thomas hopes to exploit in the future. One day, Thomas had spotted the governor banishing Murray, giving Thomas the opportunity to be appointed the direct advisor to the governor, but before Thomas could celebrate his victory over Murray, we cut back to the present. As Vassmark greets Thomas, Thomas immediately stiffens up, hearing Vassmark state that Corran and his men are heading to VIDZ. Embarrassed, Thomas kneels before Vassmark, promising to do better, but Vassmark can't help but point out Murray must be the reason Thomas is failing. Unable to face Vassmark, Thomas notices Vassmark kneel beside him, reminding Thomas that he doesn't hate him for failing. Vassmark states that he and Thomas are the same, both wanting to protect their homeland, therefore Vassmark orders Thomas to slay Corran at all cost. Cutting back to Stotts, Ars and the gang finally begin strategizing to invade VIDZ, prompting Corran to remind everyone that Thomas had personally attempted to slay Corran already, a sign of desperation. Before Ars can ask how Murray feels now that they'll be confronting Thomas directly, a knight suddenly reports a messenger from VIDZ has appeared. Rushing to speak with the messenger, Corran is shocked to hear Kansas Vandal wants a truce, but Corran laughs seeing that Kansas is admitting defeat, seeing Corran has already conquered so much. Smirking, the messenger corrects Corran, stating that the truce is to actually spare Curran's army, revealing that Kansas has developed a massive catalyzer capable of wiping out cities in an instant. Calling Kansas bluff, Curran wonders why a weapon of such a scale has never been used before, but the messenger mentions how they want to spare as many lives as possible. Needing time to think, Curran and the others all head into a separate room, all agreeing that such a weapon to appear suddenly in VIDZ must be a lie. Seeing as no one would believe such a thing, Curran says they'll reject the messenger's offer of a truce, but Ars asks what Rosal thinks of the situation. Rosal wonders why the enemy would even make such a bluff, turning to Murray only to ask her to divulge more about Thomas. Hesitant at first, Murray eventually gives in, explaining why herself and her brother became strategists. Several years ago, the head of house, Edward Grandjean, was suddenly charged for suspicion of plotting against the governor. Edward along with Murray and Thomas was hence stripped of their noble title, something Edward knew was the scheming of other nobles. As a final pledge, Eduardo asked that the governor at least spare and nurture his children, knowing Murray and Thomas are both geniuses, but if the governor refuses, at least execute them, as Eduardo fears his children's genius would damage Missian in the future. Having heard everything, Thomas is shocked their own father would execute their own children, having sworn full loyalty to Missian, but Murray states that their father was simply covering for them, having asked for other things as well, but the governor ignored Eduardo's demands, including the need to execute his children. Just like that, Murray and Thomas were thrown to the streets, having lost their father along with their noble status, making Thomas despair. Murray points out how foolish their father was, having not even put up a fight, but Thomas orders Murray to not speak ill of their father. Patting Thomas on the head, Murray reminds Thomas they are now commoners, both agreeing to join the Officers' Academy for Commoners, but Murray points out how Thomas would use any chance he got to yell at her. Hearing all of this, the gang feel bad for Murray's past, but Murray brushes it off, instead heading to drink some booze. That evening, Thomas is seen setting off with several hooded men, asked by Lord Kansas if Thomas will be okay attacking Castle Stotts himself, but Thomas cuts Kansas off, stating that he must prove his allegiance to Vastmark. At the same time, Curran finishes up their strategy to invade VIDZ, but suddenly receives reports of a large weapon being moved onto VIDZ Hill. Terrifying everyone, Ars asks Murray if Thomas is still bluffing, relieved to hear she still thinks Thomas is lying. Seeing the nobles still panicking, Murray calls them cowards, wondering who they should send in to scout the weapon just in case. Calling upon Pham and his men make their way to the weapon, scouring the area only to discover something. Ars reports Pham's findings, stating that the weapon is a fake since it doesn't contain a tank great enough to store aqua magia, plus there were no mages present. Rosal finds it strange that Thomas would use the fake weapon to stall for time, as this would only help Curran bolster their army, but Curran says VIDZ could also use the time to reinforce their troops as well. Not wanting to waste any more time, Curran says they'll head out immediately, but Ars suddenly gets deja vu, crying that this setup is too familiar. Agreeing with Ars, Murray points out Ars had used a similar tactic in their mock battle, having sent in a false traitor to encourage the enemy to attack, but set up traps to catch off the cocky advance. With Curran amazed, Ars's party was able to deduce such a tactic. Rosal declares the only possible ambush location is the Forest of Kai, something that prompts Curran to declare they'll burn down the forest to end the plans the enemies have. As Murray praises Thomas for using one of her own tactics against them, we cut to that night where Thomas's men are setting up traps in the Forest of Kai. Checking on his men's progress, Thomas declares that he has finally bested his sister, having personally led Murray into thinking they would use the forest to ambush, but Thomas has planted explosives that will detonate when the forest burns down, ultimately injuring Curran's forces heavily. Thomas continues by revealing their actual plan, stating that even with the explosion, Curran's forces still outnumber them, so they must use the moment the explosion goes off and give their lives to ensure Vastmark is victorious. Seeing his men terrified, Thomas offers his men to run away now, but flashing back to the day when Thomas met Vastmark for the first time, Thomas was captivated hearing Vastmark believed his dad wasn't a traitor, forever pledging his allegiance to Vastmark. Thomas states that he wants to make his father proud along with defeating Murray, even willing to face the enemy alone, but shockingly Thomas notices none of his men have chosen to flee. Just like Thomas, the men all pledge their loyalty to Thomas, making Thomas proud as he orders everyone to prepare themselves for the explosion. The next day, Curran and his forces have finally arrived in front of the Forest of Kai, all ready to settle the war once and for all. Check out one of our other videos on the screen or in the info card above. Subscribe, like and comment.